I still remember the first thing I noticed about the building. It wasn't the cracked walls. It wasn't the broken elevator. It wasn't even the way people lowered their voices whenever its name came up. It was the windows. There were hundreds of them stacked above one another, stretching into the gray evening sky. Most were dark. A few glowed with weak yellow light, but one window on the 7th floor stood completely black. Not dark, black, like something was blocking the light from inside. I don't know why it bothered me so much, but I couldn't stop looking at it. And 3 months later, I would find out exactly what was behind that window. By then, it was already too late. I moved into the building because I was broke. That's the honest truth. Work had been slow. I was a freelance photographer, mostly shooting small events, local businesses, and whatever jobs I could find online. The money came and went. Mostly went. When my landlord raised the rent on my old apartment, I had no choice but to leave. For 2 weeks I searched every listing I could find. Everything was expensive. Everything except Riverside Court. The ad looked strange. Only 3 photos. No description. Just an address and a monthly rent that seemed almost impossible. When I called, the manager answered immediately. "Still available," he said. Almost too quickly. I asked why it was so cheap. There was a long pause. Then he simply said, "Old building." That was all. 2 days later, I was standing outside it. Riverside Court sat at the edge of the city, near an abandoned rail yard. The place looked older than every building around it. The brick walls were stained dark from decades of rain. Several balconies leaned slightly. The sign above the entrance had lost half its letters. Even during the afternoon, the building seemed trapped in shadow. The manager met me in the lobby. His name was Mr. Dalton. Thin, gray-haired, tired-looking, like he hadn't slept properly in years. He handed me a key before I had even finished filling out the paperwork. That should have been my first warning. Most landlords wanted references, background checks, deposits, questions. Mr. Dalton wanted none of that. He just wanted someone living there. As we rode the elevator, I noticed something strange. The building was quiet. Too quiet. Hundreds of apartments. Almost no sound. No televisions. No music. No conversations behind doors. Nothing. The elevator creaked upward. 4th floor. 5th floor. 6th floor. The old cables groaned overhead. Then we stopped at 7. The doors opened. A cold draft slipped into the elevator. For some reason, the hallway felt darker than the others. I couldn't explain why. The lights worked. Everything was visible. Yet the corridor somehow felt dim, like sunlight refused to reach it. My apartment was 714, near the end of the hall. As we walked, I noticed something else. Apartment 707. The black window, the one I had seen from outside. Its door sat halfway down the hallway. The number plate was missing. Only empty screw holes remained. I glanced at it. Mr. Dalton immediately looked away, almost like he didn't want to see it. "Vacant?" I asked. His footsteps slowed. "Has been for years." Then he kept walking. The conversation ended there. My apartment itself wasn't terrible. Small living room, tiny kitchen, 1 bedroom, old hardwood floors. Nothing special, but for the price, it was perfect. I signed everything that afternoon. By sunset, I was officially a resident of Riverside Court. The first week passed quietly. Too quietly. I spent my days editing photographs and looking for work. At night, I explored the neighborhood with my camera. The building remained strange. People rarely spoke. Neighbors nodded politely, but never stopped to chat. The hallways stayed empty. Sometimes I would go hours without seeing another resident. It felt less like an apartment building and more like a hotel where everyone had checked out. One evening, I visited a nearby diner. An old woman behind the counter asked where I lived. When I told her, her smile disappeared. Just for a second. Then it returned. Artificial. Forced. That old place, she asked. Yeah. She wiped a glass slowly. You like it there? The question felt odd. Sure. She nodded, but she didn't look convinced. A few minutes later, she asked another question. You're on which floor? 7. The glass slipped from her hand. It shattered on the floor. Several people turned around. Nobody spoke. The old woman stared at me. Then she whispered something. So they finally rented it again. I asked what she meant, but she refused to answer. The rest of the meal felt uncomfortable. Like everyone suddenly knew something I didn't. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. When I returned home, the 7th floor hallway was empty as usual. I unlocked my apartment, then froze. Something sat on the floor outside my door. A photograph, black and white, old, very old. The edges were yellowed. I picked it up. It showed Riverside Court sometime in the past. Maybe the 1980s. Maybe earlier. People stood outside the entrance. Families, children, residents. I studied the faces. Then I noticed someone. A man standing near the edge of the photo, looking directly at the camera. Everyone else smiled. He didn't. His expression was blank, cold, and for some reason, he felt familiar. I turned the photo over. Written on the back were 4 words. He never left. No name. No explanation. Nothing else. A chill crawled through me. I looked around the hallway. Empty. Silent. Who left this? How long had it been there? I checked every door nearby. Nobody answered. Eventually, I went inside and locked the door. That should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. Because the next morning, I found myself staring at the photograph again. Something about it felt wrong. Not scary. Wrong. Like a mistake hidden in plain sight. I spent nearly an hour studying it. Then I finally saw it. The man near the edge of the image. The familiar face. I recognized him. It took a moment, but I knew exactly where I had seen him. My stomach tightened, because the man in the photograph looked exactly like Mr. Dalton, the building manager. Same face, same eyes, same thin frame. Only the photograph appeared to be at least 20 years old, maybe older. Yet he hadn't aged. Not really. Maybe a little. But not enough. Not nearly enough. That evening, I knocked on his office door downstairs. He answered almost immediately. When I showed him the photograph, the color drained from his face. For several seconds, he simply stared. Then he took a slow breath. Where did you get this? It was outside my apartment. His eyes narrowed. Who gave it to you? I don't know. Another silence. Long. Uncomfortable. Then he handed it back. You should throw it away. Why? His gaze drifted toward the hallway. toward the elevator, toward somewhere else entirely. I'd forget about old stories if I were you. Old stories. The word stuck with me. What stories? He hesitated, just for a second. Then he finally answered. There was a disappearance here. I felt my pulse quicken. When? 20 years ago. The exact moment he said it, the lights in the office flickered. Just once. Then everything returned to normal. Mr. Dalton didn't seem surprised, almost like he expected it. I asked who disappeared, but he was already opening the door. The conversation was over. As I stepped into the hallway, he said one final thing. Something I wouldn't understand until much later. Some places don't like being remembered. Then the door closed. That night, I searched the internet for Riverside Court. Most results were ordinary. Property records, old listings, city permits. Then, buried deep in an archived newspaper website, I found a headline from 20 years earlier. Local woman missing from Riverside Court. I clicked the article. A grainy photograph appeared. The missing woman smiled at the camera. 26 years old. Last seen entering the building. Never seen again. No suspects. No body. No answers. Case unsolved. I kept reading. Then I noticed the apartment number. The woman had lived in apartment 707. The apartment with the black window. The apartment directly across the hall from mine. And when I looked up from my laptop, I realized something that made my blood run cold. For the first time since moving in, a thin line of light was visible beneath the door of 707, as if someone was inside. The light under apartment 707 was gone by morning. I stood in the hallway staring at the door while holding a cup of coffee that had already gone cold. The gap beneath the door was dark again. Silent. Empty. At least that's what it looked like. For a moment, I almost convinced myself I had imagined it. Maybe I had been tired. Maybe I had stared at the old newspaper article for too long. Maybe my mind had connected things that weren't really connected. A missing woman. An abandoned apartment. A strange old building. The pieces fit together too perfectly. But as I turned away, something caught my eye. A tiny scratch near the doorknob. Fresh. The brass beneath the black paint looked exposed. Someone had touched that door recently. I knew it. The thought followed me all day. While editing photos. While eating lunch. Even while trying to sleep. The image of that thin line of light kept returning. And another question kept growing beside it. If the woman from apartment 707 vanished 20 years ago, why was I suddenly seeing signs of life now? 3 days later, I found something even stranger. The mailboxes were located in the lobby near the entrance. Old metal boxes lined one wall. Most were dented. Some had broken labels. The whole thing looked ancient. I was checking my mail when I noticed a small crowd standing nearby. 3 residents. Nobody speaking. Just watching. Following their gaze, I found myself looking at a mailbox near the bottom row. Number 707. The lock was covered in scratches. Layers and layers of them. As if dozens of keys had been forced into it over the years. But that wasn't the strange part. The strange part was the stack of envelopes sticking out from inside. Fresh envelopes, new stamps, recent dates, all addressed to the missing woman. I checked the name twice, then a third time. It matched the newspaper article perfectly. The same woman, the same tenant, the The same person who had disappeared 20 years ago. One of the residents noticed me staring. An elderly man. Thin face. Watery eyes. He immediately looked away. The others did the same. Nobody wanted to discuss it. That silence bothered me more than the letters. People avoided normal gossip. They avoided small talk. But this felt different. This felt like fear. That evening, I returned to the lobby. The letters were still there. 5 of them now. I crouched beside the mailbox. The labels were faded. The metal smelled like rust. And someone had written a date in black marker near the lock. The year the woman disappeared. I ran my fingers across it. The ink felt old, permanent, almost like a memorial or a warning. I looked around. The lobby was empty. Then I did something I probably shouldn't have done. I tugged on one of the envelopes, just enough to read the return address. My stomach tightened. There wasn't one. No sender. No company. No family member. Nothing. Just her name. Apartment 707. Riverside Court. As if whoever mailed them expected her to still be alive. Still living there. Still checking her mail. The elevator suddenly dinged behind me. I nearly dropped the envelope. Mr. Dalton stepped out. The manager froze when he saw me near the mailbox. His expression changed instantly. Not anger. Something deeper. Worry. What are you doing? I stood up. Who keeps sending these? His eyes moved toward the letters. For a second, he looked exhausted, like he had answered this question too many times before. No one knows. I laughed nervously. Come on. I'm serious. The laugh disappeared from my face. He wasn't joking. Someone sends them every month. Who? I told you. His voice lowered. No one knows. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The lobby suddenly felt smaller, quieter. Then he added something that made my skin crawl. They started arriving a week after she vanished. I stared at him. What? 1 letter every month. He glanced toward the mailbox. 20 years. The number echoed in my head. 20 years. 1 letter every month. That wasn't a prank. That was obsession. Who keeps writing to someone for 20 years? And why? I expected him to explain more. Instead, he walked away, leaving me alone beside the mailbox, and with more questions than answers. That night's sleep never came. Rain tapped softly against my windows. Traffic hummed in the distance. The building creaked around me. Around 2 in the morning, I finally got out of bed. I don't know why. Maybe curiosity. Maybe stupidity. Maybe both. I grabbed my camera and headed downstairs. The lobby lights were dim. Half the bulbs had burned out years ago. The mailboxes sat in shadow, waiting. I approached slowly. The building seemed different at night, more alive somehow. Every pipe groaned. Every floorboard shifted. The old walls whispered with sounds that shouldn't have existed. Then I noticed something. The lock on mailbox 707 wasn't actually locked. At least not completely. Someone had damaged it long ago. There was a tiny gap near the side, just enough to see inside. I hesitated, then crouched, and looked through. The beam from my phone illuminated the interior. Letters, dozens of them, maybe hundreds. Yellow envelopes, white envelopes, some stained brown with age. They filled nearly the entire box. My pulse quickened. Nobody had collected them. Not once. Not in 20 years. The letters simply remained there. Waiting. A strange sadness settled over me. I imagined someone writing every month, believing their message might somehow reach her, or maybe knowing it never would. Then something else caught my eye. A photograph, buried beneath the envelopes. Only a corner was visible, but it looked familiar, very familiar. I widened the gap slightly, just enough to pull it free. The photograph slid into my hand, and my breath stopped. It was the same picture I had found outside my apartment. The old black and white image of Riverside Court. The same residence. The same building. The same man standing near the edge. Mr. Dalton. Only this copy had something written across the front. A sentence scribbled in red ink. She wasn't the first. I stared at those words for what felt like forever. The rain outside grew heavier. The building groaned. And suddenly, every story I'd heard felt much bigger. The missing woman wasn't the mystery anymore. She might only be part of it. I slipped the photograph into my pocket, then froze. Footsteps. Soft. Slow. Somewhere behind me. I turned around. The lobby was empty. No one near the entrance. Nobody near the elevator. Nothing. Yet the sound continued. One step, then another, coming from above. I looked toward the staircase. The door stood slightly open. Darkness filled the gap, and for a brief second, I thought I saw someone standing on the landing, watching. The shape vanished almost immediately. Maybe it wasn't there at all. Maybe it was only shadow. But I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been observing me. I hurried back upstairs, locked my door, checked every window, then sat at my kitchen table until sunrise. The photograph rested beside me the entire night. She wasn't the first. The sentence kept repeating inside my head. By morning, curiosity had become obsession. I skipped work completely. Instead, I visited the city archives. Old newspapers, property records, missing persons reports, anything connected to Riverside Court. Hours passed. Most of it was useless. Then, shortly before closing time, I found a document hidden inside an old newspaper file. A small article, barely 3 paragraphs, published 32 years ago. The headline was simple: local tenant missing. Different person. Different year. Same building. Riverside Court. Apartment 707. I felt a cold wave move through my chest. Another disappearance. Same apartment. Long before the woman from 20 years ago. The article ended with one sentence: the tenant was never found. I leaned back in my chair, trying to process what I was reading. One disappearance could be coincidence. 2 felt impossible. And suddenly, a much darker question appeared. How many others had there been? When I returned to Riverside Court that evening, the sun was setting behind the city skyline. Orange light spilled across the brick walls. For the first time, the building looked beautiful, almost peaceful. But the feeling didn't last, because as I walked through the lobby, I glanced toward mailbox 707 and stopped cold. A new envelope had appeared. It hadn't been there that morning. I was certain. The white paper looked fresh. The stamp looked new. And written across the front in careful black handwriting was a message that made my hands begin to shake. To the occupant of apartment 707, Someone finally knew the apartment wasn't empty anymore. The envelope was gone when I came back downstairs. I stood in front of mailbox 707 for almost a full minute, staring at the empty slot. My heart was beating harder than it should have been. I knew what I had seen. The envelope had been there. Fresh white paper, fresh black ink, a message addressed to the occupant of apartment 707. Now it had vanished. The mailbox remained stuffed with old letters, but that newest one was missing. Someone had taken it, or someone had never wanted me to see it for long. I looked around the lobby. The usual silence filled the building. The old light fixtures buzzed overhead. Dust drifted through the yellow glow. Nothing moved. Nobody watched me. At least nobody I could see. That night I couldn't focus on work. I sat at my desk pretending to edit photographs while my thoughts circled the same questions. Who had delivered that envelope? Who removed it? And why did somebody suddenly care about apartment 707 after all these years? Outside my window, rain drifted across the city. The streets reflected red brake lights and pale street lamps. Everything looked distant, muted. By midnight, I finally gave up trying to work. I made coffee, opened my laptop, and began searching deeper into Riverside Court. Most records led nowhere. Dead ends, broken archives, missing files. The building seemed strangely absent from public history, almost like pieces had been removed. Around 1 a.m, I noticed something else. A faint sound. At first, I thought it was traffic, then pipes, then maybe wind. I muted my laptop. The apartment fell silent. The sound remained. Very faint, very distant. A voice. I sat perfectly still. The sound seemed to come from somewhere inside the wall. A low murmur, almost impossible to understand. Then it disappeared. I waited. 10 seconds. 20. 30. Nothing. I laughed nervously. The building was old. Old buildings made noise. That had to be it. Then the voice returned. This time there were 2 of them, speaking quietly, far away, like people having a conversation in another room. A cold sensation moved through my chest. I slowly stood and followed the sound. It led me toward the heating vent beneath my living room window. The closer I got, the clearer the voices became. Not clear enough to understand, just enough to know they were human. I crouched beside the vent. The metal grill felt cold against my fingers. The voices drifted through the darkness inside. Then one sentence emerged clearly. She shouldn't have gone upstairs. I froze. The voice sounded distant, muffled, like it was traveling through a long tunnel. Then another voice answered. A man's voice. Lower, older. You know what happened to the last one. Silence followed. Complete silence. I waited for more. Nothing came. The building settled around me. The pipes groaned softly. The voices were gone. I sat there for several minutes before finally pulling away. Part of me wanted to believe it was another apartment. Maybe neighbors. Maybe television, noise traveling through old ducts. That explanation felt reasonable, comforting. The problem was that almost nobody on the 7th floor seemed to talk. Most nights the hallway felt abandoned, and neither voice sounded modern. I can't explain that. It sounds ridiculous, but it was true. The words felt old somehow, like listening to a recording from decades ago. I barely slept. The next morning, I convinced myself I had imagined everything. Stress, obsession, too little sleep. Those explanations sounded much better than voices inside heating vents. The day passed quietly. No mysterious envelopes. No strange discoveries. For the first time in weeks, I began to relax. Then evening arrived, and with it came another surprise. As I stepped off the elevator, I noticed something sitting outside apartment 707. A chair, an old wooden chair, positioned directly in front of the door, facing the hallway. The sight stopped me immediately. I had never seen furniture there before. The chair looked ancient. Its wood was faded and cracked. Dust covered every surface. Yet somebody had moved it recently. The legs had scraped fresh marks across the floor. I looked around. The hallway remained empty. The chair simply sat there, watching, waiting. The feeling was impossible to ignore, like somebody had arranged it for a purpose. I hurried past it and entered my apartment, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. Around midnight, the voices returned, this time louder. I dropped my book and moved toward the vent. The conversation drifted through the metal grate. Broken fragments, pieces of sentences. The letters keep coming. Don't open the door. And he's still here. The final sentence made my stomach tighten. He's still here. The same words repeated twice, then 3 times. Each repetition sounded farther away, as if whoever was speaking was walking down a long corridor. I grabbed my phone and recorded the sound. The voices continued for almost a minute, then stopped. Just stopped, like someone had switched them off. For a while, I sat beside the vent listening. Nothing, only silence. Eventually, curiosity overcame fear. I downloaded the recording, increased the volume, and listened again through headphones. What I heard made my skin crawl. There were more voices than I realized. Not 2, at least 5, maybe 6, layered together, overlapping, whispering. Some sounded male, others female. One sounded frighteningly young, and hidden beneath them all was another sound, a metallic clanging noise, rhythmic, slow, almost like somebody striking a pipe. Over and over, I replayed it repeatedly. Each time I noticed new details, new words, new fragments. Then I heard a phrase that changed everything. Apartment 707. The voice said it clearly. No distortion. No uncertainty. Apartment 707. The missing apartment. The sealed apartment. The apartment connected to 2 disappearances. A chill spread through me, because now I knew one thing for certain. The voices weren't random. They were connected. The next day, I decided to inspect the vent system. The basement contained the building's ancient boiler room. Nobody stopped me. Nobody even noticed. The place looked forgotten. Rust covered nearly every pipe. Dust coated the concrete floor. The air smelled like metal and damp stone. Massive heating ducts ran through the ceiling, branching throughout the building like veins. I followed them deeper inside. My flashlight beam bounced across old equipment, broken tools, stacks of abandoned boxes. Then I found something strange. A section of ductwork covered with dates. Dozens of dates, written directly on the metal. Some recent, some decades old. At first, I thought they were maintenance records. Then I noticed something. Every date matched a letter delivery. The dates from mailbox 707. Month after month, year after year, someone had been keeping track. My pulse quickened. I photographed everything, every marking, every date. Then my flashlight landed on a name scratched into the metal. A name I recognized instantly. The missing woman's name. Beneath it were 3 words. She heard them too. I stared at the message. A wave of cold moved through my body. Who wrote this? When? And what exactly had she heard? For the first time, the possibility entered my mind that the voices might not be new. Maybe they had been here all along. Maybe other tenants heard them too. Maybe the missing woman had followed them just as I was doing now. And maybe that was why she vanished. I left the basement quickly. The air suddenly felt heavy, oppressive. By the time I reached my apartment, darkness had fallen outside. Rain tapped softly against the windows again. The city lights shimmered beyond the glass. Everything seemed normal, yet nothing felt normal anymore. Around 2 in the morning, the voices returned one final time, louder than ever. I rushed toward the vent, my recorder already running. The whispers filled the room, dozens of voices, talking over one another. Then slowly they became clear. A woman was speaking, calm, terrified, trying not to cry. I found the passage. My breath caught. The voice continued. I shouldn't have opened it. Another voice interrupted. A man's voice. Close it. Then came silence. Several long seconds passed. I leaned closer, almost pressing my ear against the vent. And then the woman whispered 6 words that sent a chill through every part of me. There inside the walls. The voices vanished immediately afterward. Complete silence. No static. No footsteps. Nothing. Only the sound of rain outside. I sat frozen on the floor, listening, waiting. Then I noticed something moving through the vent. A small piece of paper, slowly sliding toward the metal grate, carried by air from somewhere deep inside the building. My hands trembled as I pulled it free. The paper was old, yellowed with age, folded many times, and written across the front in faded handwriting were words that made my heart sink. If you're hearing the voices, they're already listening to you too. I didn't sleep after finding the note. I sat on my living room floor until sunrise, staring at the yellow piece of paper resting beside my camera. If you're hearing the voices, they're already listening to you too. The sentence felt wrong, not because it was frightening, because it sounded like a warning from someone who understood exactly what was happening. Someone who had been through it before. The missing woman. The tenant from apartment 707. Maybe even the people who vanished before her. Outside, the city slowly woke up. Cars appeared on the streets below. The sky turned gray. Normal life continued. But inside Riverside Court, normal was becoming harder to believe. Around 9 in the morning, I made a decision. I was done listening, done guessing. I needed proof, real proof, not whispers in vents, not anonymous letters, not cryptic messages. I wanted something solid, something that explained what was happening inside this building. And for the first time since moving in, I knew exactly where to start. Mr. Dalton, the building manager. He knew more than he admitted. I was certain of it. His office sat near the lobby. The door was closed when I arrived. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again. Still nothing. The office looked dark through the small window. Empty. For a moment, I considered leaving. Then I noticed the key hanging beside the maintenance closet. The same key Mr. Dalton always carried. My pulse quickened. He had never left it behind before. Something felt wrong. I entered the office. The air smelled stale. Old paper, dust, coffee. The room looked abandoned. A desk, metal filing cabinets, stacks of records. Nothing unusual, at least at first. Then I noticed a drawer hanging slightly open. Inside were dozens of photographs. Old photographs. Most showed Riverside Court over the years. Residents standing outside. Maintenance crews. Holiday gatherings. Routine moments frozen in time. I flipped through them carefully. Then my hand stopped. One photograph showed the 7th floor hallway. The picture looked old. Very old. The date written on the back read 1998. 1 year before the woman disappeared. Apartment 707 appeared clearly. But something else caught my attention. A door farther down the hall. Apartment 714. My apartment. I stared at it. The number wasn't 714. It was 307. For several seconds, I thought I was reading it wrong. Then I checked again. Apartment 307. Same hallway. Same layout. Same position. Yet the number was different. A cold feeling settled inside me. That made no sense. Buildings don't randomly change apartment numbers. I searched through more photographs. Every older image showed the same thing. Apartment 307. Apartment 307. Apartment 307. Then suddenly, years later, the number became 714. As if someone had deliberately changed it. The discovery answered one question, but created another. Why? I searched the filing cabinets next. Most folders contained ordinary records, maintenance requests, rent agreements, inspection reports. Then I found a folder marked renovation project, restricted. The date was 20 years old, the same year the woman vanished. Inside were blueprints. My hands trembled as I unfolded them. The building layout spread across the desk. Every floor, every hallway, every apartment, and hidden between the pages was something shocking. A second set of corridors, narrow maintenance tunnels, running inside the walls, connecting nearly every apartment in Riverside Court. My stomach tightened. The tunnels weren't shown on public records. They had been hidden, removed from later blueprints, almost erased. But there they were, a maze running through the entire building. One route connected directly to apartment 707, another connected to my apartment, or rather, apartment 307. For a long moment, I simply stared. The voices, the vents, the notes, the disappearances, everything suddenly felt connected. Someone could move through those tunnels unseen, listen through walls, watch tenants, hide, disappear. A sound interrupted my thoughts. Footsteps, coming from the hallway outside the office. I quickly folded the blueprints. The footsteps stopped. Silence followed. Then someone slowly tried the doorknob. My chest tightened. The handle moved once, twice, then stopped. Several long seconds passed. Finally, the footsteps retreated. I waited until they disappeared completely. Only then did I breathe again. Whoever had been outside knew someone was inside the office, and for some reason they hadn't entered. I left through the back exit, the blueprints hidden beneath my jacket. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Back inside my apartment, I spread everything across the table. Photographs, maps, notes, the warning from the vent. The pieces were finally starting to form a picture. And the center of that picture was apartment 307, not 707, the apartment I now lived in. That realization refused to leave me. As evening approached, I studied the blueprints more carefully. One section kept drawing my attention. A maintenance access point hidden behind my bedroom wall. I checked the exact location. The closet, behind a row of shelves. For several minutes I stood there staring. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to walk away, to pretend none of this existed. But curiosity had already taken control. I emptied the closet, removed the shelves, and found exactly what the blueprints promised. A metal panel, painted over many times, nearly invisible. My pulse pounded in my ears. The screws came loose surprisingly easily, as if someone had opened it before. Recently, the panel lifted away. Darkness waited beyond. Cold air drifted outward. The smell reminded me of concrete and rust. I aimed my flashlight inside. A narrow passage stretched into the building, just wide enough for a person. The hidden tunnel was real. For a long moment, I simply stared. Then I climbed inside. The tunnel swallowed sound immediately. Everything became quieter, more distant. The walls were rough concrete. Dust coated every surface. Pipes ran overhead. My flashlight beam shook slightly. The deeper I moved, the colder the air became. Soon I found markings on the walls. Names, dates, messages, hundreds of them. Some scratched into concrete, others written in faded marker. One sentence appeared repeatedly. He's still here. The same phrase from the voices. The same warning. Again and again. As if dozens of people had left it behind. The realization made my skin crawl. How many people had been inside these tunnels? And why? The passage eventually widened, opening into a larger maintenance chamber. My flashlight swept across the room, then stopped. Photographs covered the walls. Hundreds of photographs. Thousands maybe. My breath caught. Every resident, every floor, every decade. Pictures stretching back years. People sleeping, walking hallways, standing at windows. Most didn't know they were being photographed. Someone had been watching them, watching everyone, for a very long time. Then I saw her, the missing woman. Dozens of photographs, some smiling, some entering her apartment, some taken through windows, some taken from impossible angles. The dates continued for months after her disappearance. My heart nearly stopped. Months after, the police believed she vanished. Yet someone kept photographing her. Someone knew exactly where she was. The chamber suddenly felt suffocating. I forced myself to keep looking. And then I found the final photograph. It hung alone, separate from the others, protected behind glass. The image showed the missing woman standing inside the maintenance tunnels, looking directly into the camera. Terrified, behind her stood another figure, mostly hidden in shadow. Only part of the face was visible, but I recognized it immediately. Mr. Dalton. or someone who looked exactly like him. The photograph was dated 3 weeks after she supposedly disappeared. A chill spread through every part of me. Mr. Dalton had lied. He knew far more than he admitted. Maybe everything. Then another detail caught my eye. Written beneath the photograph was a sentence. A simple sentence. 3 words. Apartment 307 occupied. I stared at those words, confused. The woman had lived in 707. Why write 307? Then the truth finally hit me. Hard enough to make me dizzy. Apartment 307 had never become 714. The number change wasn't a renovation. It was a cover-up. Someone had renamed the apartment, hidden its history, buried it beneath a different number. Because whatever happened here didn't start in 707. It started in 307. My apartment, the room where I slept every night, the room connected to the hidden tunnels, the room connected to every disappearance. And as I stood there trying to process that realization, I heard something moving in the darkness beyond the chamber. Slow footsteps, careful footsteps, coming toward me through the tunnels. Not distant, not imagined, real. Someone else was down there. And based on the fresh footprints, I suddenly noticed in the dust around me. They had been using these tunnels very recently. The hotel should have been closed years ago. That was my first thought when I saw it. Rain slid down the windshield as I pulled into the empty parking lot just before sunset. The building stood alone beside a forgotten highway, surrounded by dead grass and rusting streetlights. Its faded sign still read ASHWOOD Hotel, but several letters had burned out long ago. From a distance, it looked abandoned. From up close, it looked worse. I sat in my car for a moment, staring at the dark windows. Only 3 rooms appeared to have lights on. The rest looked empty. Watching, waiting. I remember checking the assignment paperwork again. The insurance company had sent me to investigate a property dispute. The hotel's owners were fighting over ownership rights after years of financial problems. My job was simple. Spend a few days at the property. Inspect records. Document conditions. Submit a report. Nothing unusual. At least that was what I thought. The missing persons case wasn't mentioned anywhere in the paperwork. I didn't learn about that until later. By then, leaving wasn't as easy as it should have been. The rain intensified as I stepped from the car. Cold wind pushed across the parking lot. The hotel looked larger than the photos I had received. 5 stories, hundreds of windows, most completely dark. A neon vacancy sign buzzed weakly near the entrance. The sound reminded me of an insect trapped behind glass. I grabbed my suitcase and headed inside. The lobby felt strangely warm. Not comfortable. Heavy. The kind of warmth that builds inside old buildings and never really leaves. The air smelled faintly of dust and old carpet. A grandfather clock ticked near the front desk. Every sound seemed louder than normal. My footsteps. My breathing. The wheels of my suitcase. Behind the desk sat a woman in her 60s. Gray hair. Thin glasses. Tired eyes. She looked up slowly as I approached, almost like she already knew who I was. "You must be Mr. Harper." I nodded. She slid a key across the counter. Not a key card. A real key. Attached to a brass tag. Room 18. I picked it up. The metal felt surprisingly cold. "Busy season," I joked, glancing at the empty lobby. Her expression didn't change. "We don't get many guests anymore." The answer felt simple, yet something about it unsettled me. I signed the register. As I did, I noticed the names above mine. Only 3 entries in the last 2 weeks. 3 guests. An entire hotel. I looked around again. The silence suddenly felt much heavier. How many people are staying here now? The woman hesitated. 4, including me. A hotel this size should have been bustling. Instead, it felt forgotten, like the world had simply moved on without it. I took the elevator to the 2nd floor. The ride felt painfully slow. The old machinery groaned behind the walls. Every few seconds, the elevator shuddered slightly. The numbers above the door flickered. 1, 2, then the doors opened. The hallway beyond seemed endless. Dim yellow lights stretched into the distance. The carpet showed decades of wear. Several room doors had been permanently sealed with plywood. Others looked untouched for years. The entire floor smelled faintly of old wood and stale air. My room sat near the far end. Room 18. The brass numbers hung slightly crooked. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The room was clean enough. Small bed, desk, television, bathroom. Nothing unusual, but something immediately felt off. The window. It faced the rear of the property, toward a large section of the hotel that appeared completely abandoned. Dozens of dark windows stared back. Many had curtains. Some didn't. One window on the 4th floor caught my attention. Its curtains were partially open, and for a brief second, I thought someone was standing there, watching my room. The shape disappeared almost immediately. Maybe it was a reflection, maybe a curtain moving, but the image stayed with me. I unpacked quickly, tried to focus on work, yet my attention kept drifting back toward that dark section of the building. There was something unsettling about it. Not frightening, just wrong, like looking at a photograph where one detail doesn't belong. As night settled outside, I decided to explore. The hotel was too quiet, too strained, and curiosity has always been my biggest weakness. The 1st floor contained a restaurant that hadn't operated in years. Tables remained arranged neatly. Dust covered everything. The kitchen stood frozen in time. Menus still hung on walls. A calendar remained open to a month, nearly a decade old. It looked as if the staff had simply walked away one afternoon and never returned. The deeper I explored, the stranger things became. Entire sections of the hotel were unused. Locked conference rooms, empty lounges, storage areas filled with abandoned furniture. Yet despite the neglect, everything seemed maintained, cleaned, preserved, as if someone still cared about the place. I eventually found myself near a hallway leading toward the older wing. A chain blocked the entrance. Authorized personnel only. The sign looked recent. Very recent. I studied the corridor beyond. Darkness swallowed most of it. Only a few emergency lights remained active. Something about that hallway pulled at me. A strange feeling. The same feeling I sometimes get while photographing abandoned buildings. The sense that a place wants to tell a story. Then I heard footsteps. Slow footsteps. Somewhere beyond the chain. I froze. The sound lasted only a few seconds, then stopped. Complete silence followed. I waited. Nothing else happened. No voices. No doors opening. Nothing. Eventually, I convinced myself it was another guest. One of the 3 people staying here. A reasonable explanation. Still, when I returned to the lobby later, I asked the woman at the front desk, "Is someone working in the old wing?" Her eyes moved toward the hallway, then back to me. "No." The answer came too quickly. I heard footsteps. She remained silent. For a moment, I thought she might explain. Instead, she asked a question. "Why were you down there?" Something in her tone made me uncomfortable, like I had broken an unspoken rule. I shrugged. "Just exploring." She nodded slowly, then lowered her voice. "Most guests stay out of that area." The conversation ended there, but not before I noticed something. Her hands were trembling slightly, as if the topic itself made her nervous. I returned to room 18 shortly before midnight. The hallway remained empty. The elevator sat motionless. No sounds came from neighboring rooms. The entire floor felt abandoned. Inside my room, I opened my laptop and reviewed the property files again. That was when I found the missing newspaper clipping. A scanned article accidentally included among ownership documents. The headline immediately caught my attention. "Traveler VANISHES from ASHWOD Hotel." The article was old, 32 years old. A businessman had checked into the hotel and never checked out. Police searched the property. No trace was found. No body. No suspect. Nothing. The case remained unsolved. I leaned back in my chair. Interesting. Strange, but probably unrelated to my assignment. Then I noticed another article attached beneath it. Different year. Different victim. Same hotel. Another disappearance. My pulse quickened. I continued reading. A third article appeared. Then a fourth, each separated by years. Different people. Different backgrounds. Same location. Ashwood Hotel. A chill moved through me. 4 disappearances, all connected to this building. And suddenly, I understood why the hotel felt so empty. People remembered. Maybe not consciously. Maybe not openly. But places develop reputations. Stories linger. Fear lingers. The clock beside my bed showed 1:17 a.m. Rain tapped softly against the window. I closed the laptop. Tried to convince myself the cases were old history. Nothing more. Then I noticed something outside. A light, far across the abandoned section of the hotel. One window. 4th floor. The same window I had been watching earlier. A figure stood behind the glass, perfectly still, looking directly toward room 18. And when I stepped closer to the window for a better look, the figure slowly raised one hand, as if it knew I was watching. The figure was gone when I looked back. I don't mean it walked away. I don't mean it stepped out of sight. 1 second, it stood behind the 4th floor window. The next second, the room was empty. Dark, still, as if nobody had ever been there. I remained frozen beside my window for several moments. Rain streaked across the glass. The abandoned wing sat silent beneath the storm. No movement. No lights. Nothing. Eventually, I convinced myself there had to be an explanation. A reflection. A guest. My imagination. After all, I had spent half the night reading about disappearances. Anyone would be unsettled. Still, sleep never came. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that raised hand. The way it seemed to recognize me. The way it felt intentional. By morning, I looked terrible. Dark circles under my eyes. Headache. Too much coffee. Not enough rest. The front desk woman noticed immediately. You don't look like you slept. I forced a smile. Interesting place. She didn't smile back. Instead, she looked toward the old wing. Just for a second. Then she returned to organizing paperwork. That tiny movement caught my attention. Most people glance without thinking. Her glance felt different. Like a habit. Like she checked that section of the hotel often. Maybe too often. I spent the morning reviewing property records. Invoices. Insurance claims. Repair estimates. Most were boring. Exactly the kind of paperwork I expected. Then I noticed something strange. Several financial records were missing. Entire years had gaps. Large gaps. The hotel existed. The ownership changed. Guests stayed here. Yet portions of its history simply weren't there. Almost like someone had removed them. The discovery bothered me. Not because it was suspicious. Because it felt deliberate. Missing paperwork usually leaves traces. Explanations. References. These records simply vanished. Around noon, I decided to ask questions. The front desk woman introduced herself as Evelyn. It was the first time she had offered her name. We sat in the empty restaurant drinking coffee. Rain clouds still covered the sky outside. The hotel felt quieter than ever. Those disappearances, I said. Her hand stopped moving. Only for a moment. Then she continued stirring her coffee. What about them? How many were there? The question lingered between us. For a few seconds, I thought she might refuse to answer. Then she sighed. Officially. The word caught my attention. Officially. Not actually. Officially. 4, she said. The answer made my stomach tight. Officially. Her eyes remained on the coffee cup. People talk. What do they say? A long silence followed. Then she spoke so quietly I almost missed it. They say there were more. The restaurant suddenly felt colder. I waited for her to continue. She didn't. Eventually she stood and returned to the lobby, leaving me alone with my thoughts. More. Not 4. More. The word followed me throughout the afternoon. Later that day, while photographing parts of the property, I noticed something behind the front desk. A shelf. Nothing unusual, except one object sitting near the back. An enormous leather-bound ledger. Dust covered most of it. The book looked ancient, far older than the computers and paperwork surrounding it. Something about it immediately grabbed my attention. The size, the age, the fact that it appeared hidden. I couldn't stop thinking about it. Hours passed. Guests never appeared. The lobby remained empty. Eventually, Evelyn disappeared into a back office. For reasons I still can't fully explain, I walked behind the desk. The ledger sat exactly where I remembered. Thick leather cover. Faded gold lettering. Guest register. My pulse quickened. I opened it carefully. The pages crackled softly. Each entry contained names, dates, room numbers, decades of guests. At first it seemed ordinary. Then I noticed something strange. Certain names had circles drawn around them. Small red circles, barely noticeable. I flipped through more pages. More circles. More names. The pattern continued year after year. My curiosity grew. I copied several names into my notebook, then searched them online. The results appeared almost immediately. Missing persons. Missing persons. Missing persons. every circled name belonged to someone who had vanished. A cold sensation spread through my chest. I checked another. Same result. Then another. Again. Every circled guest had disappeared. Every single one. The realization hit harder than I expected. This wasn't rumor anymore. This was evidence. Someone inside the hotel had marked them. Someone knew exactly which guests never returned home. I continued turning pages. Faster now. The circles stretched back decades. 30 years. 40 years. Maybe more. Then I noticed something even stranger. Most of the circled guests shared one thing in common. They stayed only one night. Check-in. No recorded check-out. Gone. The pattern repeated again and again. Different years. Different people. Same outcome. My hands felt cold. Because patterns mean intention. Patterns mean design. Patterns mean someone notices. Or participates. Then I found a page that made me stop completely. The entry was 32 years old. The businessman from the newspaper article. The first disappearance I had read about. His name was circled. But that wasn't what caught my attention. The room number did. Room 18. My room. I stared at the page. Then checked again. Room 18. Exactly where I was staying. A wave of unease rolled through me. Coincidence. It had to be coincidence. Hotels reuse rooms. That wasn't unusual. Yet the feeling remained. I kept searching. Another missing guest. Room 18. Another. Room 18. My heartbeat quickened. Another. Room 18. Not all of them, but far too many. The same room appeared repeatedly across decades. The room where I slept. The room where I had seen the figure. The room assigned to me without hesitation. I slowly closed the ledger. Suddenly I felt exposed. Like someone might be standing behind me. Watching. I turned around. The lobby remained empty. The grandfather clock ticked softly. Nothing else moved. Still, I returned the ledger exactly where I found it. Then stepped away from the desk, trying to appear calm, trying not to think, trying not to imagine why I had been placed in room 18. That evening brought a brief sense of relief. The rain finally stopped. Sunlight broke through the clouds. For the first time since arriving, the hotel looked almost normal, almost welcoming. I even considered driving into town for dinner, getting away from the building for a few hours, clearing my head. Then something unexpected happened. A delivery truck arrived. The first visitor I'd seen all day. The driver carried several boxes into the lobby. As he signed paperwork, I overheard him speaking with Evelyn. Still open, huh? He laughed. The sound echoed strangely through the empty room. Evelyn didn't laugh. The driver noticed. His smile faded. Then he lowered his voice. They ever find those people? The question hung in the air. Evelyn's face hardened immediately. No. The driver nodded awkwardly, collected his paperwork, and left. The entire exchange lasted less than 30 seconds. Yet it revealed something important. People outside the hotel knew the stories, knew the disappearances. The reputation hadn't faded. Not completely. As darkness returned, I headed back to my room. The second-floor hallway seemed longer than before. Quieter. The old lights buzzed overhead. Room after room passed by. Empty. Dark. Forgotten. When I finally reached room 18, something waited on the floor outside my door. A photograph. Old. Black and white. My pulse instantly quickened. I picked it up. The image showed the hotel lobby decades earlier. Guests filled the room. Luggage stacked near the entrance. Employees smiled at the camera. Everything looked alive. Normal. Then I noticed one man standing near the back. His face had been scratched out. Violently scratched. Again and again. As if someone desperately wanted him erased. I turned the photograph over. 3 words were written in faded ink. He kept records. I stared at the message. The ledger immediately came to mind. The circles. The missing guests. The marked names. Then another thought appeared. A much darker one. If somebody left this photograph for me, how did they know I had looked at the ledger? At that exact moment, a soft sound drifted from somewhere down the hallway. A door slowly closing. I looked up. The corridor was empty. Yet one thing had changed. At the far end of the hall, a room door now stood slightly open, and hanging beside it was a brass number plate. The door wasn't there the next morning. I know how that sounds. I know exactly how it sounds. But when I stepped into the hallway after barely sleeping, the corridor looked completely normal. No open door. No brass number plate. No second room 18. Just the same faded carpet stretching toward the elevator. The same yellow lights. The same silence. I walked to the far end anyway. Slowly, carefully. The place where I had seen the door now held nothing except a blank section of wall. Not even a mark. No hinges. No frame. No evidence that a room had ever existed there. For several moments, I simply stood staring. Part of me wanted to laugh. Another part didn't. Because I wasn't confused. I remembered exactly what I saw. The photograph. The scratched out vase. The number plate. The open doorway. Those things had happened. Yet the hallway offered no proof. Only questions. And that was becoming a pattern inside Ashwood Hotel. Every answer created 2 new mysteries. After breakfast, I decided to stop chasing stories and start chasing facts. Facts could be measured. Facts couldn't disappear overnight. At least that was what I told myself. The hotel's blueprints were stored in a records room near the lobby. Accessing them wasn't difficult. Most employees seemed to assume nobody cared enough to look. The room itself smelled like old paper and dust. Metal filing cabinets lined the walls. Stacks of documents filled every shelf. I found the building plans after nearly an hour of searching. The oldest set dated back more than 60 years. I spread them across a large table. At first, everything seemed normal. Guest rooms, conference halls, storage areas, service corridors. Then I noticed something strange. The dimensions didn't match. I measured twice, then 3 times. The second floor hallway containing room 18 should have been roughly 70 feet long. Yet according to the building's exterior measurements, there was nearly 30 feet unaccounted for. 30 feet hidden somewhere inside the structure. I checked again. Same result. The space existed on paper, but not in reality, or at least not where guests could see it. A cold feeling settled into my chest. Hidden space. Hidden rooms. Suddenly, the strange door from the previous night felt much more important. Someone had altered the building, or parts of it had been concealed. I photographed every blueprint before returning them. As I left the records room, I noticed someone watching me. an older man sitting alone in the lobby. I hadn't seen him before. One of the other guests, perhaps. He looked to be in his 70s. Thin, pale, wearing an old brown coat. His eyes followed me as I crossed the room. Not aggressively, just carefully, like he recognized something. I considered introducing myself. Before I could, he stood up and walked away. The encounter lasted only seconds. Still, it stayed with me. There was something unusual about him. Something familiar. That afternoon, I drove into town. Ashwood Hotel sat several miles from the nearest businesses, but eventually I found a small library. Old newspapers filled the archive room. I spent hours researching. Most articles repeated information I already knew. Missing guests, unsolved cases, police investigations, dead ends. Then I found an interview published 20 years earlier. A former maintenance worker from the hotel. His name was Robert Finch. The article itself wasn't about disappearances. It focused on the building's history. Yet one sentence immediately grabbed my attention. The hotel has rooms that don't exist anymore. I read the line 3 times. Then 4. The article offered no explanation. No follow-up questions. Nothing. Just that single statement buried inside a much longer interview. By then my curiosity had become something else. Obsession. I needed to know what he meant. The article listed an address. A very old address. Probably outdated. Still, it was better than nothing. To my surprise, the house still existed. A small white home near the edge of town. The yard was overgrown. Paint peeled from the porch. The place looked forgotten. I knocked anyway. No answer. I was turning back toward my car when the door opened. An elderly man stood inside. Thin, gray-haired, tired. The moment I mentioned Ashwood Hotel, his expression changed. Not fear. Regret. The kind that settles into a person's face after many years. You should leave that place alone. His voice sounded almost defeated. I only have a few questions. So did the police. The answer surprised me. Police questioned you. Many years ago. He looked past me toward the road, as if checking whether someone had followed. Then he sighed. Come inside. His living room smelled faintly of old books. Photographs covered the walls. Most showed construction crews, buildings, work sites, a lifetime of maintenance jobs. For nearly an hour we talked. At first he shared ordinary stories. Repairs, renovations, ownership changes. Then the conversation shifted. Slowly, carefully, toward the disappearances, toward the hidden sections of the hotel, and finally toward the thing that had haunted him for decades. The hallways. I leaned forward. What about them? His eyes darkened. They weren't always the same. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he continued. I know that sounds crazy. I didn't answer, because after everything I'd seen, it didn't sound crazy at all. There were nights I'd finish repairs and walk back through a corridor I'd known for years. He swallowed, and it would be longer. A chill moved through me. Longer. Not by much, 10 feet, 20 feet. His hands trembled slightly. Sometimes shorter. The room felt colder. What caused it? His laugh carried no humor. That's the problem. He looked directly at me. I never found out. The conversation continued for another hour. Most of it only raised more questions. Yet one detail stood above everything else. Robert claimed the hotel once contained an entire service wing hidden behind false walls. Employees used it decades ago. Then ownership changed. The wing was sealed, officially removed. Yet nobody ever explained why. When I finally returned to Ashwood Hotel, darkness had already fallen. Clouds covered the moon. The building seemed larger than before. Darker, almost waiting. I entered through the lobby. Evelyn sat behind the desk. As always, as if she never left. The old man from earlier was gone. No sign he had ever been there. I headed upstairs immediately. My room suddenly felt less important than the hallway itself. I wanted answers, measurements, proof. I grabbed a tape measure from my equipment case and stepped into the corridor. The hallway stretched silently before me. I measured its length, 71 feet. Exactly what I expected. I wrote it down, then returned to my room. For a while, nothing happened. I watched television, reviewed notes, tried to relax. Around midnight, I checked again. The hallway measured 82 feet. I stood frozen, certain I had made a mistake. I measured again. Same result, 82 feet. My pulse quickened. I checked every wall, every corner. Nothing appeared different. The corridor simply extended farther than before. The discovery should have terrified me. Instead, I felt something else. Validation. For the first time, I knew I wasn't imagining things. Something was wrong with this hotel. Something physical. Something real. The feeling lasted only a few minutes. Then I noticed another change. A door, halfway down the hallway. Room 26. I stared at it. The room hadn't existed earlier. I was absolutely certain. Yet there it stood. Brass numbers, wooden frame, everything looking completely normal. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. Slowly I approached. The carpet muffled my footsteps. The hotel remained silent. No voices, no movement, only the distant hum of old electrical systems. The closer I got, the more uneasy I felt. Not because of the door, because of what hung beside it. A framed photograph, black and white, the same style as the one left outside my room. This image showed hotel guests standing in a hallway, smiling, laughing, living ordinary lives. Then I noticed one detail. The hallway in the photograph was identical to the one where I stood now, except it contained far more doors. Many more, including room 26, and room 31, and room 34. Rooms that didn't exist, or weren't supposed to. A cold sensation crawled up my spine. The photograph wasn't showing the hallway as it was. It was showing the hallway as it used to be, before something had been removed, or hidden. I reached toward the frame. The glass felt cold beneath my fingers. Then I noticed writing on the bottom corner. A small handwritten note, almost invisible. 3 words. Count the doors. My stomach tightened. Slowly I looked up and began counting. 1, 2, 3, 4. The numbers climbed higher, much higher, far higher than the hotel's blueprints claim should be possible. When I reached the end, I stopped breathing for a moment, because there weren't 20 rooms on the floor anymore. There were 31. And behind me, somewhere deeper in the corridor, a door quietly opened. The door stayed open, Only a few inches, just enough to create a thin black line in the wall. I stood frozen at the far end of the hallway, staring into the darkness beyond it. Every instinct told me to return to room 18. Lock the door. Sleep. Leave the hotel in the morning. But that instinct had been losing ground ever since I arrived. The truth was closer than ever. I could feel it. Somewhere inside this building. Hidden behind sealed rooms and missing records. Hidden behind decades of disappearances. And somehow connected to the guest who never checked out. The hallway remained silent. The open door waited. I slowly walked toward it. The carpet muffled my footsteps. The old lights hummed overhead. Everything felt strangely distant, like the hotel itself was holding its breath. When I finally reached the doorway, I looked inside. The room appeared empty. Dust covered the floor. Old furniture sat beneath white sheets. A broken lamp leaned against one wall. Nothing unusual. At first, then I noticed the guest book. It sat alone on a small table. Perfectly clean. No dust. As if someone had placed it there recently. My pulse quickened. I stepped inside. The air felt colder. The smell reminded me of old paper and damp wood. I opened the book. Most entries were decades old. Names, dates, room assignments, normal hotel records. Then one name appeared again, and again, and again, page after page, year after year. The same guest, the same handwriting, the same room. Nathan Vale. The earliest entry dated back 41 years. The latest entry was from 6 months ago. I stared at the pages. That wasn't possible. Nobody stays in a hotel for 40 years. Not without being noticed. Not without becoming part of the building itself. Yet there it was. Hundreds of signatures. Every one identical. Every one written by Nathan Vale. A floorboard creaked somewhere above me. I looked up instantly. Silence followed. Then another sound drifted through the ceiling. Slow footsteps. Heavy footsteps. Walking directly overhead. I backed away from the table. The room suddenly felt much smaller. The footsteps continued for several seconds. Then stopped. The silence afterward felt worse. Eventually, I returned to room 18 carrying photographs of the guest book pages. I spent hours researching Nathan Vale. At first, I found nothing. No social media. No obituary. No public records. Almost as if he had never existed. Then a newspaper archive finally produced a result. One article, 42 years old. A black and white photograph accompanied it. The image showed a man standing outside Ashwood Hotel. Dark hair, thin face, sharp eyes. The headline made my stomach tighten. Local historian, investigates hotel disappearances. Nathan Vale. According to the article, he had arrived at Ashwood while researching a series of unexplained vanishings. Several weeks later, he disappeared. Officially, at least according to police records. Yet the guest book told a different story. Nathan hadn't disappeared. Nathan stayed. The realization sat heavily in my chest. I remembered the circled names, the hidden hallways, the sealed wing, the changing floor plan. Somewhere inside all of it stood a man who should have vanished 40 years ago. Or somebody pretending to be him. Outside my window, darkness covered the property. The abandoned wing looked even more lifeless tonight. Then I noticed movement. A light, small and distant, Fourth floor. The same window. The same room. The same place where I had first seen the figure. This time the light remained steady, almost inviting. I grabbed my flashlight, my jacket, and headed downstairs. The lobby stood empty. Evelyn was gone. For the first time since arriving, the front desk sat unattended. Even the grandfather clock seemed quieter. I crossed the lobby and entered the restricted hallway. The chain blocking the entrance had disappeared. That alone should have stopped me. Instead, it pulled me deeper. The abandoned wing felt completely different from the rest of the hotel. Colder, older. The wallpaper peeled from the walls. Water stains marked the ceiling. Dust coated every surface. Yet someone had recently walked there. I could see footprints, fresh ones, leading toward a stairwell. I followed them upward. Third floor, fourth floor. Each step echoed softly. The building seemed endless. The footprints continued, always ahead, always leading deeper. Eventually, they stopped outside a room. No number remained on the door, only scratches where numbers once hung. The light beneath the door glowed faintly. My heart pounded. For several seconds, I simply listened. Nothing. No voices. No movement. I slowly pushed the door open. The room beyond looked frozen in another decade. Old furniture. Old wallpaper. Old curtains. Everything untouched by time. A single lamp illuminated the space, and seated beside the window was a man. Reading. He looked up as I entered. My blood turned cold, because I recognized him immediately. The newspaper photograph. The same face. The same eyes. Nathan Vale. 40 years older, yet somehow unmistakable. He didn't seem surprised to see me. In fact, he looked tired, as if he'd been expecting me. You finally found the room. His voice sounded calm, gentle, not threatening. That somehow made everything worse. I couldn't speak. My mind struggled to process what I was seeing. Nathan closed his book. You're investigating the disappearances. I nodded slowly. Like you did. A faint smile crossed his face. For the first time, genuine sadness appeared in his eyes. Yes. The room fell silent. Outside, wind rattled the old windows. Nathan looked toward the darkness beyond the glass. Then back at me. Do you know why people vanished? The question caught me off guard. I expected answers. Instead, he was asking questions. No. His smile disappeared. Neither did I. Something about that answer frightened me more than any ghost story. 40 years. 40 years inside this place. And he still didn't understand. Nathan stood and walked toward a section of wall hidden behind old curtains. He pulled the fabric aside. A narrow door appeared, almost invisible. My pulse quickened. What is that? Nathan stared at it, longer than necessary. When he finally answered, his voice had changed. Quieter, more distant. That's where they went. A chill crawled through my body. The hidden door looked ordinary, yet every instinct screamed that it wasn't. Nathan stepped back. I opened it once. I swallowed. What happened? His eyes drifted toward me. For a moment he seemed much older, much more exhausted. That's why I'm still here. The answer raised more questions than it solved. Nathan noticed. Of course he did. Everyone notices silence like that. He slowly reached into his coat pocket. then handed me a folded photograph. The image showed several missing guests standing together. Every victim from the hotel's most famous disappearances. All in one place. All alive. Behind them stood the same hidden door. And written across the back of the photograph were 6 words. They never left the hotel. I stared at the sentence, then looked up. But Nathan was no longer watching me. His attention remained fixed on the hidden door, almost like he could hear something behind it. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then I heard it too. A faint sound. Not from the hallway. Not from outside. From behind the concealed door itself. Voices. Dozens of voices. Soft. Distant. Whispering something I couldn't quite understand. And one of those voices sounded exactly like mine. The footsteps always started at exactly 3:17 in the morning. Not 3:16. Not 3:18. Every single night. 3 slow footsteps. A pause. Then 3 more. The first time I heard them, I barely paid attention. Apartment buildings make noise. Pipes rattle. Doors settle. People stay awake later than you think. But after the 5th night in a row, I couldn't ignore it anymore. Because the footsteps were coming from apartment 6B. And apartment 6B was empty. Officially empty. It had been vacant for almost 7 months. I knew because I worked nights as the building's security guard. Part of my job involved checking vacant units, recording maintenance issues, monitoring deliveries, keeping an eye on residents who complained about strange activity. Apartment 6B had become familiar to me. Every week I checked its locks. Every week I confirmed nobody was inside. And every week the apartment remained exactly the same. Empty, silent, forgotten. Yet every night at 3:17 a.m. someone walked across its floor. The building itself wasn't special. Just another aging apartment complex on the edge of the city. 6 floors, 48 units, a parking garage underneath. Nothing remarkable. Most residents were older people, retirees, night workers, families who had lived there for years. The kind of place where everyone recognized each other. The kind of place where unusual things stood out quickly, especially after midnight. My shift started at 10 every evening. Most nights passed quietly. I monitored cameras, handled maintenance requests, walked the hallways. Simple work, boring work, at least until the footsteps started. The sounds were impossible to miss once I noticed them. Heavy footsteps, slow and deliberate, crossing the floor of 6B, back and forth, always following the same pattern. 3 steps, pause, 3 steps, pause, then silence. The entire thing lasted less than a minute. Yet it happened every single night. Exactly at 3:17. The timing bothered me more than the sound itself. People are unpredictable. Buildings aren't. Nothing happens with that kind of precision unless something causes it. I spent several nights trying to find a reasonable explanation. Maybe noise traveled through the walls. Maybe another apartment created an echo. Maybe the old plumbing expanded at night. All possible. All logical. But logic became harder to defend after I checked the cameras. The hallway camera covered the entrance to 6B. Every night I reviewed the footage. Nobody entered. Nobody left. The door never opened. Yet the footsteps continued. One night I decided to wait outside the apartment. At 3:10 a.m., I stood in the hallway, coffee in one hand, flashlight in the other. The corridor stretched quietly in both directions. The old fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Nothing moved. Nothing seemed unusual. Then the clock on my phone changed to 3:17. Immediately the footsteps began. 3 heavy steps, directly inside the apartment. I froze. The sound was unmistakable. Not pipes, not settling wood. Footsteps. Someone walking across the living room floor. The hairs on my arms rose instantly, because I stood only a few feet away. If someone was inside, they should have heard me. Yet the footsteps continued. 3 more steps. Pause. Then silence. I listened for movement. Nothing. No voices. No doors. No breathing. Just quiet. After several seconds, I unlocked the apartment. Management had provided keys months earlier. The unit officially sat empty. I opened the door. The apartment was dark, still, cold. My flashlight swept across the rooms. Kitchen, living room, bedroom, bathroom. Nobody. No signs of entry. No signs of anyone living there. The layer of dust near the windows remained untouched. Everything looked exactly as it should. Empty. And yet I knew what I'd heard. I locked the apartment again, returned downstairs, and spent the rest of the night trying not to think about it. The next evening brought another surprise. An elderly resident named Mrs. Holloway approached the security desk. She lived directly beneath 6B. Apartment 5B. Tiny woman. White hair. Always polite. Always smiling. Not that night. That night she looked exhausted. You're hearing them too, aren't you? The question caught me off guard. I tried to remain professional. Hearing what? She stared at me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she leaned closer. The footsteps. A chill moved through me. You hear them. Every night. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. 3:17. The exact time. Not approximately. Exactly. I felt my stomach tighten. Mrs. Holloway wasn't guessing. She knew. Have you reported it before? She nodded slowly. 3 times. What happened? A sad smile crossed her face. Nothing. That answer lingered with me long after she left. Nothing. No investigation. No explanation. Just nothing. Later that night, I searched old maintenance reports. Dozens of complaints appeared. Everyone connected to 6B. Strange noises. Footsteps. Furniture moving. Someone walking overhead. The report stretched back nearly 6 months. Then I noticed something odd. The complaints suddenly stopped. Not because the noises stopped, because residents stopped reporting them, almost as if they had given up or accepted them. That realization unsettled me more than the reports themselves. People adapt to strange things when they happen long enough. The human mind prefers acceptance over fear. Around 2:45 a.m., I rode the elevator to the 6th floor. This time, I planned to enter the apartment before the footsteps began. No waiting outside. No guessing. I wanted answers. The unit looked exactly as before. Empty rooms. Dusty windows. Faint smell of old paint. Nothing unusual. I sat on the living room floor and watched the clock. 3:10. 3:12. 3:15. Silence. The apartment felt lifeless, completely abandoned. Then the digital clock changed. 3:17. Immediately the footsteps started. My entire body locked up. Because they weren't coming from another room. They weren't coming from the hallway. They were inside the apartment. Somewhere behind me. 3 heavy steps. Slow. Measured. I turned instantly. Nobody stood there. The room remained empty. Yet the sound continued. 3 more steps. Crossing the floor. Moving through open space. The noise sounded so close, I could almost point directly at it. My flashlight shook slightly. The footsteps stopped. The silence afterward felt enormous. For several seconds, I couldn't move. Couldn't think. Couldn't explain what had happened. Then I noticed something near the far wall. A small metal hatch, almost hidden beneath old paint. I had inspected the apartment several times before, yet somehow I'd never noticed it. The hatch sat low against the wall, barely visible. Curiosity slowly replaced fear. I crossed the room, kneeled beside it, and brushed away dust. The metal door revealed a maintenance access panel. Small, old, locked. I stared at it. A strange feeling settled inside me. The same feeling people get when they know they're standing near something important. Something hidden. Something that explains more than it should. The next morning, I searched the building's blueprints. Most were decades old, faded and damaged. But eventually, I found what I was looking for. A maintenance corridor. Narrow, hidden inside the walls, running behind several apartments, including 6B. My pulse quickened. Suddenly, the footsteps made sense. At least partially. Someone could move through those corridors unseen. Someone could access hidden spaces. Someone could create the illusion of an empty apartment being occupied. For the first time, I had a real lead. A real explanation. And for a few hours, that felt comforting. Until I found the name attached to the maintenance corridor records. The last employee assigned access. The last person officially documented using those passages. A maintenance worker named Daniel Mercer. The problem was simple. Daniel Mercer hadn't worked in the building for years. Because according to police records, he disappeared 6 months ago. The same week apartment 6B became vacant. And according to the incident report attached to his file, the last place anyone ever saw him was inside that apartment at exactly 3:17 in the morning. The name appeared where it shouldn't have existed, buried inside a stack of forgotten maintenance records, typed once, then never mentioned again. I stared at the document for several seconds, because after 3 nights of digging through old files, I had learned something important. Names disappeared inside this building. Records vanished. Reports were edited. Entire tenants seemed to be erased over time. Yet somehow this one name remained. Elena Hartwell. Apartment 4C. Tenant status, active. Date entered, 23 years ago. Date removed, blank. I leaned back in my chair. Outside the security office, the building remained quiet. The digital clock above the monitor read 2:04 a.m. For a moment, I forgot about Daniel Mercer. Forgot about the footsteps. Forgot about apartment 6B. Because a different mystery had just appeared. If Elena Hartwell was still listed as active, why did nobody know who she was? I searched the resident database. Nothing. No current records. No forwarding address. No lease termination. No death certificate attached to the file. Just that single maintenance document. Almost hidden, almost forgotten, yet not completely erased. Something about that bothered me. The building's management had changed several times over the years. Files had been moved, computers replaced, records digitized. Most mistakes disappeared during those transitions. This one survived. That meant someone either missed it or left it there intentionally. I printed the file, then continued searching. Another document appeared 20 minutes later. A repair request, submitted from apartment 4C. The date stopped me cold. The request had been filed 6 months ago, the same week Daniel Mercer disappeared. I read the form twice, then a third time. Water leak in bathroom ceiling. Tenant Elena Hartwell. My mouth went dry. That couldn't be right. The woman hadn't appeared anywhere else in decades. Yet someone filed a maintenance request under her name only 6 months ago. Someone inside this building. Someone who knew that name. Or someone who was Elena Hartwell. A strange feeling settled into my stomach. The same feeling I had experienced when standing inside apartment 6B. The feeling of getting closer to something hidden. Something that didn't want to be found. At 3:17 a.m., the footsteps started again. 3 steps. Pause. 3 more. The sound drifted faintly through the security office walls. I listened carefully. For the first time, they felt almost secondary. Like a distraction. The real mystery had shifted. Now I wanted to know about Elena. The footsteps ended. Silence returned. But my attention stayed fixed on those records. When morning arrived, I skipped sleep. Instead, I drove directly to the city archives. The building sat downtown between a courthouse and an old newspaper office. Dusty shelves filled every room. Boxes stacked from floor to ceiling. The perfect place for forgotten stories. I spent hours searching. Most of the morning produced nothing. Then I found her. A photograph. Black and white. Taken 24 years earlier. The image showed a young woman standing outside the apartment complex. Dark hair. Serious eyes. Maybe 30 years old. Below the photograph sat a newspaper headline. Local woman assists police investigation. I immediately requested the full article. When it arrived, my pulse quickened. Elena Hartwell had been involved in a criminal investigation connected to multiple disappearances. Not as a suspect, as a witness. According to the article, several residents vanished over a 5-year period. Most cases remained unsolved. Police believed the incidents were unrelated. Elena disagreed. She claimed the disappearances were connected. She claimed someone inside the building was responsible. I kept reading. Then the article suddenly ended. No conclusion. No resolution. No follow-up. Just a brief note stating that Elena Hartwell herself vanished 3 weeks later. I sat frozen. The archive room suddenly felt colder. A witness investigating disappearances, then disappearing herself. The pattern felt familiar. Too familiar. Daniel Mercer. Nathan Vale. Now Elena Hartwell. People who looked too closely. People who found something. People who vanished. I left the archives carrying copies of every article I could find. The drive back felt longer than usual. Clouds covered the sky. Rain tapped softly against the windshield. The apartment building appeared gray and lifeless as I pulled into the parking lot. For the first time since starting this investigation, I wondered whether I should stop. The thought surprised me. I wasn't easily frightened. That was part of the job. Yet something about Alina's story unsettled me deeply. Because she wasn't chasing ghosts. She wasn't writing books. She wasn't investigating for money. She lived there. She saw something. And whatever she saw frightened her enough to involve the police. Then she disappeared. Just like the others. That evening, I decided to visit apartment 4C. The unit currently belonged to a retired teacher named Harold Simmons. I'd spoken with him several times before. Nice man. Lived alone. Always friendly. When he opened the door, he immediately noticed the folder in my hands. Something wrong. I hesitated, then asked a simple question. How long have you lived here? He thought for a moment. 20 years. My stomach tightened. 20 years. Exactly. Almost exactly. The timing matched Alina's disappearance. Do you remember the tenant before you? The smile faded from his face. Only slightly. But enough. I've been asked that before. The answer surprised me. By who? His eyes drifted down the hallway. Different people. Something changed inside his expression. A shadow of discomfort. Maybe even fear. Then he stepped aside. Come in. The apartment looked ordinary. Bookshelves. Family photographs. Old furniture. Nothing unusual. Yet Harold seemed nervous. The conversation wandered briefly before returning to Alina. When it did, he became very quiet. Finally, he sighed. I never met her. I waited. But his eyes settled on the far wall. The wall separating his apartment from the neighboring unit. There was something left behind. A chill moved through me. What? Without speaking, Harold walked into a bedroom. A minute later, he returned carrying a small metal box. Old. Scratched. Locked. I found this inside the wall during renovations years ago. I stared at it. What's inside? Never opened it. The answer shocked me. You didn't try. His laugh sounded uneasy. I did. He pointed toward the lock. Several scratch marks covered the metal. Evidence of failed attempts. Eventually, I gave up. I carefully took the box. It felt heavier than expected. The surface carried faint initials. E.H. Elena Hartwell. For several moments, neither of us spoke. The room seemed unusually quiet, almost listening. Then Harold said something that made my skin crawl. There was another thing. I looked up. What thing? His voice dropped lower. When I first moved in. He hesitated. I used to hear someone walking inside the walls. The words landed heavily. Not above. Not below. Inside the walls. My thoughts immediately returned to the maintenance corridors. The hidden passages. Daniel Mercer. The footsteps. Suddenly, separate mysteries began connecting. Slowly, like puzzle pieces finding their place. I left the apartment carrying the metal box. The rain had intensified outside. Wind rattled the windows. The building groaned softly. Old structures always made noise during storms. Yet tonight every sound felt different. Meaningful. I returned to the security office, placed the box on the desk, and finally managed to force the lock open. The metal snapped with a sharp crack. For several seconds I simply stared. Part of me didn't want to continue. The box represented 23 years of unanswered questions. Opening it felt important. Dangerously important. Finally, I lifted the lid. Inside sat photographs. dozens of them. Apartment hallways, maintenance tunnels, residents, security staff, building managers. Elena had been documenting something, tracking something. Then I found the final photograph, and my breath caught. The image showed a narrow corridor hidden behind the apartment walls. A maintenance passage. Standing inside that passage was a man. Tall, thin, partially obscured by darkness. His face blurred by motion. Yet one detail remained visible. A security uniform. The same security uniform used in the building today. My hands trembled slightly, because attached to the photograph was a handwritten note. Just 4 words. He never left. I stared at the sentence, then slowly looked toward the security office window, toward the reflection staring back at me. And for the first time since beginning this investigation, a terrifying possibility entered my mind. What if the person responsible for the disappearances wasn't hiding somewhere inside the building? What if they had been walking its hallways every night for decades, pretending to belong there? The bed was warm. That was the first thing that made my stomach drop. I stood inside apartment 6B with my flashlight pointed toward the mattress, unable to look away. The apartment was supposed to be empty. It had been listed as vacant for 7 months. I had personally inspected it dozens of times, and yet the blanket lying across the mattress was still holding someone's body heat. I slowly reached out and touched it. Warm, not hot, not fresh enough to mean someone had just left, but warm enough to mean someone had been there recently. Very recently. For several seconds I couldn't move. The silence inside the apartment felt heavier than ever. The old walls seemed to lean closer. The darkness in the corners appeared deeper. Every instinct told me I wasn't alone. Not necessarily inside the room, but somewhere nearby. Watching, listening, waiting. I slowly backed away from the bed. My flashlight swept across the apartment. Kitchen, bathroom, closets. Nothing. No person. No movement. No obvious explanation. Only the lingering evidence that someone had been living here. Someone who should not exist. My eyes drifted toward the maintenance hatch again. The hidden access panel near the living room wall. The same hatch connected to Daniel Mercer's records. The same hatch connected to the maintenance corridors hidden inside the building. This time I noticed something new. Scratches, fresh scratches, tiny marks around the metal edges, as if the panel had been opened recently. My pulse quickened. I knelt beside it. The lock remained in place, but the dust around the hatch had been disturbed. Someone had touched it. Someone had used it. And suddenly, the warm bed made perfect sense. Whoever occupied apartment 6B wasn't entering through the front door. They were moving through the walls. The realization sent a cold wave through my body. I returned to the security office and reviewed building blueprints again. This time I focused entirely on the maintenance corridors. The hidden network spread farther than I expected, farther than management records suggested. Narrow passages connected multiple floors, old utility routes, electrical access points, service tunnels. Most had supposedly been sealed years ago. Supposedly. That word had started losing meaning around this building. By midnight, I had made a decision. I was going inside. Not tomorrow. Not next week. Tonight. Curiosity had become stronger than caution. I gathered a flashlight, extra batteries, a small camera, Then I returned to apartment 6B. The hallway felt unusually quiet, even for late night. No televisions, no conversations, no doors opening, only the faint hum of the building itself. The maintenance hatch opened easier than expected, almost as if someone had used it recently. A narrow darkness waited beyond. Dust floated through my flashlight beam. The air smelled stale, old, forgotten. I hesitated only briefly before climbing inside. The tunnel was smaller than I imagined, barely enough room to move comfortably. Concrete walls surrounded me. Old pipes ran overhead. Electrical cables stretched into darkness. The farther I crawled, the quieter the world became. The sounds of the apartment disappeared. The sounds of the building faded. Eventually, only my breathing remained. A strange feeling settled over me. The sensation that I had entered a place not meant for residents. A hidden version of the building, one existing behind ordinary life. Then I found the first sign. A flashlight battery. Recent, not dusty. Someone had dropped it. Someone using these passages. I continued forward. A few minutes later, I found another clue. An empty water bottle. Then canned food containers. Then folded blankets. Each discovery made my heart beat faster. This wasn't occasional use. This wasn't somebody exploring. Someone lived down here. The evidence became impossible to ignore. The deeper I traveled, the more organized everything appeared. A small storage area contained stacked supplies. Food, bottled water, medical kits, even books. The sight stopped me completely. Someone had built a life inside the walls. Not for days, not for weeks, for years. The realization felt surreal. Thousands of people had walked through this building, lived here, worked here, raised families here. And all that time, someone had existed only a few feet away. Hidden, watching, unknown. I snapped photographs, documented everything. My rational mind finally had proof. Physical evidence, real evidence. Yet instead of relief, I felt growing unease. Because one question refused to leave my mind. Why stay hidden? If someone lived here willingly, why never leave? What could keep a person inside these walls for years? The answer arrived sooner than expected. I found photographs, hundreds of them, stored neatly inside plastic containers. Residents, maintenance workers, building managers, security guards. The photos stretched back decades. Different years, different generations, different faces, yet all connected by one thing. They had been watched. Every image had been taken secretly, from hidden angles, through vents, from maintenance corridors. The unknown resident had been observing everyone. For a very long time, a chill crept into my chest. The photographs felt deeply personal, deeply invasive, the kind of collection built through obsession, not curiosity. Obsession. Then I noticed something even stranger. Several faces appeared repeatedly. Daniel Mercer, Elena Hartwell, Mrs. Holloway. People connected to the building's mysteries. People connected to disappearances. And among the newest photographs sat someone else. Me. I froze. The image had been taken only days earlier. I stood outside the security office reviewing reports, completely unaware. Someone had photographed me. Someone watching from inside the walls. The realization made the tunnel suddenly feel much smaller, much more dangerous. I was no longer investigating a mystery. The mystery had been investigating me. For the first time that night, fear outweighed curiosity. I turned toward the direction I'd come, ready to leave. Then I heard it. A sound. Soft. Distant. Somewhere deeper, inside the corridor system. Footsteps. 3 slow steps. Pause. 3 more. My blood ran cold. The exact pattern. The same pattern heard every night at 3:17. Except now, I knew where the sound originated. Not inside apartment 6B. Inside these tunnels. The footsteps continued. Slow. Measured. Moving closer. I switched off my flashlight instantly. Darkness swallowed everything. I stood motionless, listening. The footsteps echoed faintly through the concrete passages. 3 steps. Pause. 3 steps. Pause. Closer. My heart hammered against my ribs. The logical explanation stood directly in front of me. Someone lived here. Someone walked these corridors. Someone created the sounds. Yet the fear remained, because the timing still didn't make sense. Neither did the disappearances. Neither did Alina. Neither did Daniel. The footsteps stopped. Silence returned. I waited. 1 minute. Then 2. Nothing. Eventually, I switched the flashlight back on. The corridor ahead remained empty. No person. No movement. No explanation. Only darkness. I slowly continued deeper. Partly because curiosity returned. Partly because I needed answers. The tunnel eventually opened into a larger maintenance room. What I found there nearly stopped my heart. A bedroom. Not a temporary shelter. Not a hiding place. A real bedroom. Bookshelves lined one wall. A desk sat beneath a lamp. Photographs covered the surfaces. Clothes hung neatly nearby. Someone had spent years here. Maybe decades. Then I noticed the journal. It rested on the desk. Open. Waiting. My hands trembled slightly as I approached. The first pages contained ordinary notes. Maintenance observations. Resident schedules. Building repairs. Then the writing changed. Gradually, the entries became more frantic, more paranoid, more desperate. One sentence appeared repeatedly, over and over. Do not let HIM see you. I turned more pages. Same warning. Again. 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 Who was him? The question immediately formed. The journal never explained. At least not directly. Instead, the writer described encounters. Brief sightings. Moments of panic. A man walking hidden corridors. A man appearing where he shouldn't. A man who never seemed to age. The final entry dated 6 months earlier. The same week Daniel Mercer disappeared. The handwriting looked rushed, almost terrified. 3 words filled the last page. He found me. I stared at the sentence. The room suddenly felt colder. The air heavier. Then I noticed something sitting beside the journal. A photograph. Fresh. Recent. Taken only hours ago. The image showed me entering apartment 6B earlier that evening. A note had been written across the bottom. Not typed. Handwritten. Careful. Deliberate. Almost polite. It said, "You should have stopped looking." And beneath those words was a second message. one that made my pulse stop completely. Welcome home. The first suitcase should not have bothered me. Hotels lose luggage all the time. People forget things. Flights get canceled. Trips end unexpectedly. That was what I told myself as I stood alone in the basement storage room of the Grand Bell Hotel. A hotel that had been closed for nearly 8 years. A hotel nobody seemed eager to talk about. I was there as part of a historical preservation project. My job was simple: catalog abandoned property, photograph items, document anything with historical value. Most days were boring. Old furniture, dust-covered paintings, broken lamps, boxes filled with forgotten paperwork. Nothing unusual, nothing mysterious. Then I found the luggage room. The discovery happened during my 3rd week inside the hotel. A maintenance key opened a narrow metal door near the basement boiler room. The room beyond wasn't marked on any floor plan. At first I thought it was simply another storage area. Then my flashlight swept across the darkness, and I saw the suitcases. Rows of them. Dozens, maybe more, stacked from floor to ceiling. Different sizes, different colors, different decades. Some looked modern. Others appeared nearly 50 years old. For several moments, I simply stared. The room felt strangely organized. Not like forgotten storage, more like a collection. The air smelled of dust and aging leather. Silence pressed heavily against the walls. Something about the place felt wrong. Not frightening, just wrong. The way a locked room feels when somebody clearly doesn't want it open. I slowly walked between the rows. Each suitcase carried a small tag. Handwritten. Names. Room numbers. Dates. The oldest tag I found dated back 43 years. The newest was only 9 years old. 1 year before the hotel closed. A cold feeling settled into my chest. That immediately raised a question. Why were these still here? Hotels normally dispose of abandoned luggage. There are procedures, storage limits, legal requirements. Nobody keeps lost property for decades. Yet somehow these remained, waiting, undisturbed. I photographed everything, then returned upstairs. The discovery stayed with me all evening. By midnight, I found myself reviewing the photographs again. Something kept bothering me. Finally, I realized what it was. Many of the room numbers on the tags repeated. Room 214, Room 507, Room 319. The same rooms appeared again and again across different decades. Different guests, different years. The pattern seemed impossible to ignore. The next morning, I searched hotel records. Most documents were incomplete. Years of neglect had damaged countless files. Still, I eventually found guest registries. And that's when the real discomfort began. Several names from the suitcases appeared in hotel records. That wasn't surprising. What was surprising was how they disappeared. No checkout records, no departure notes, no luggage claims, nothing. Guests arrived, checked into rooms, then simply stopped existing inside the records. At first I assumed poor bookkeeping. Old hotels often had incomplete paperwork. Then I noticed something else. Several guests had been reported missing. Officially missing. Police reports attached to archived newspaper clippings confirmed it. People checked into the Grand Bell Hotel, then vanished. Some cases remained unsolved even now. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the documents. A strange unease slowly crawled through me. The suitcases suddenly felt different, less like abandoned property, more like evidence. Evidence nobody wanted to examine too closely. That night, I returned to the basement. Alone. The hotel remained completely empty. The preservation team left before sunset each day. After dark, I had the entire building to myself. The isolation never bothered me before. Now it did. The luggage room felt colder than I remembered. My flashlight moved slowly across the rows. Eventually, I selected a suitcase at random. Brown leather, old-fashioned design. Dust covered most of its surface. The tag identified the owner as Margaret Collins. Room 214. 31 years earlier. I opened it carefully. The hinges groaned softly. Inside sat neatly folded clothing. Travel guides. A paperback novel. Toothbrush. Cosmetics. Everything appeared exactly as someone would leave it during a vacation. Nothing packed. Nothing prepared for departure. The owner had expected to return. That realization unsettled me immediately. Nobody abandons luggage arranged like that. Nobody leaves behind every personal belonging, especially not voluntarily. I searched another suitcase, then another. The same result every time. Normal possessions, normal lives, frozen in time, waiting for owners who never came back. Hours passed. The deeper I looked, the stranger everything became. One suitcase contained undeveloped film. Another held handwritten letters. One contained a child's stuffed rabbit. The sight of that rabbit affected me more than I expected. Its fur had faded with age. One button I hung loose. A small name was stitched into one ear. Oliver. I stared at it for several seconds, trying not to imagine the child who once carried it, trying not to imagine what happened afterward. Then I noticed something tucked beneath it. A photograph. The image showed a family standing in front of the hotel. Mother, father, young boy, all smiling, happy, normal. The back carried a date, 22 years ago. And below the date, someone had written 3 words. First night here. A chill moved through me, because according to newspaper archives, that family never returned home. I carefully placed everything back inside. The silence around me felt heavier now. The room no longer resembled storage. It felt like a graveyard, not for bodies, for lives. The feeling followed me throughout the night. Sleep came slowly, and when morning arrived, I found myself unable to stop thinking about room 214. The room number appeared too often. Too many missing guests. Too many abandoned belongings. Eventually, curiosity won. I decided to inspect the room itself. Room 214 sat on the second floor, near the end of a long hallway. The corridor showed clear signs of age. Wallpaper peeled from the walls. Dust coated every surface. Sunlight filtered weakly through dirty windows. The room door remained unlocked. I stepped inside. Nothing immediately stood out. Old furniture, faded curtains, a cracked mirror. The room looked abandoned like everything else. Yet something felt strange. A subtle feeling, almost impossible to define. Then I noticed the closet. Its dimensions seemed wrong. Slightly too shallow. Slightly too narrow. The kind of detail most people would overlook. I approached slowly, examining the wall carefully. My flashlight revealed faint seams hidden beneath old paint. A concealed panel. My pulse quickened. The panel opened with surprising ease. Dust drifted into the air. Behind it waited a narrow cavity inside the wall. Not large enough for a room, just enough space to hide objects. And someone had. Inside sat dozens of hotel registration cards. Guest records, carefully stacked, organized, preserved. I pulled one free, then another. Every card belonged to a missing guest. Every card connected to luggage stored downstairs. Someone had been collecting them, removing them from official records, hiding them. The discovery transformed everything. This wasn't neglect. This wasn't coincidence. Someone had deliberately concealed evidence. Someone working inside the hotel. Someone with access. Someone who wanted those disappearances forgot. A sudden noise interrupted my thoughts. A soft sound, barely audible. I froze. The hotel remained silent. Then it came again. A suitcase latch snapping shut. Far away, somewhere below. My stomach tightened instantly. The sound had come from the basement, from the luggage room. I listened carefully. Silence returned. For several seconds, I considered rational explanations. Old buildings settle. Metal shifts. Temperature changes create noises. All reasonable possibilities. Then another sound drifted upward through the floorboards. A slow scrape, followed by another, like heavy luggage being dragged across concrete. The hairs on my arm stood up. Because the preservation team had already gone home, I was completely alone inside the hotel. At least I thought I was. I slowly stepped into the hallway. The building stretched quietly before me. Empty, motionless. Yet deep below my feet, somewhere inside the basement, something had moved. And for the first time since finding the suitcases, a disturbing thought entered my mind. What if they weren't waiting for their owners to return? What if someone had been coming back all along? The first missing person wasn't the one that scared me. It was the 20th. I sat alone in the hotel's archive room long after sunset, surrounded by stacks of yellowed newspapers and guest records. The old desk lamp cast a weak circle of light across the papers. Everything beyond that circle faded into shadow. Outside, wind pushed softly against the building. Inside, the hotel felt completely still. Yet the silence no longer felt empty. Ever since hearing those sounds from the basement, I couldn't shake the feeling that something in the Grand Bell Hotel was awake, watching, waiting for me to discover something. And maybe hopping I wouldn't. I looked down at another newspaper clipping. A smiling man stared back at me. 40 years old. Traveling salesman. Reported missing 3 days after checking into the hotel. Police never found him. No witnesses. No suspects. No explanation. Just another disappearance. I set the clipping beside the others. There were too many now. Far too many. At first, I thought I was looking at unrelated cases. Different years. Different people. Different circumstances. But patterns had started appearing. Patterns that refused to be ignored. I spread the documents across the desk. Photographs. Police reports. Guest registries. Missing person notices. One by one, pieces began fitting together. Every victim had stayed at the Grand Bell. Every victim had arrived alone. Every victim had vanished within 48 hours. And none had officially checked out. A chill crept through me. The hotel had operated for nearly 70 years. How many disappearances could hide inside that amount of time? The answer sat directly in front of me, more than anyone realized. I counted 27 confirmed cases, 27 people connected to the hotel, 27 people who seemed to vanish without explanation. And those were only the cases I could verify. There could have been more, many more. The realization made my stomach tight, because 27 disappearances weren't a coincidence. They weren't bad luck. They weren't random. Something connected them. The question was what? I leaned back in my chair. My eyes drifted toward the dark hallway outside the archive room. For a brief moment, I considered stopping, calling the preservation board, contacting authorities, letting someone else continue. But another part of me knew exactly what would happen. The building would be sealed. The records would disappear into storage. And the truth would remain buried, just like it had for decades. No, I needed answers first. I returned to the guest logs. Most were handwritten, many barely readable. Names faded with age, dates smeared by time. Still patterns emerged. Room 214 appeared repeatedly. The same room from the hidden compartment. The same room connected to multiple disappearances. My pulse quickened. I began making a list. Room 214. Missing. Room 214. Missing. Room 214. Missing. Room 214. Missing. The pattern continued. Again and again. Different guests. Same room. Same outcome. The odds felt impossible. I stared at the list, trying to find a logical explanation. There wasn't one. Then I noticed something even stranger. Several names seemed familiar. Not because of newspaper reports, because I had seen them somewhere else. The suitcases. I quickly pulled out my photographs from the luggage room. Minutes later, I found the match. Every missing guest from room 214 still had luggage downstairs. Every single one. Their belongings remained untouched, preserved, waiting, as though someone expected them to return. A wave of unease rolled through me. The suitcases no longer felt like abandoned property. They felt like placeholders, markers, evidence that somebody never wanted forgotten. Then another detail caught my attention. The dates. The disappearances weren't random. They followed a pattern, a disturbing one. Most occurred during autumn, October, November, early December, year after year, decade after decade. The same season, the same room, the same outcome. I rubbed my eyes. The deeper I dug, the worse everything became. Each answer opened two new questions. Who chose these people? Why room 214? And how had nobody noticed this pattern before? The archive offered no immediate answers. But shortly after midnight, I found something unexpected. A box hidden behind old accounting records. The cardboard nearly fell apart when I touched it. Dust exploded into the air. Inside sat dozens of photographs. Police photographs. Evidence photographs. My heartbeat quickened. Someone had deliberately hidden these. I examined the first image. Room 214. Taken decades earlier. The furniture looked different. The wallpaper had changed, but the room was unmistakable. A second photograph showed investigators examining the closet. A third showed part of the floor. Then I found the photograph that made my skin crawl. A picture of the closet wall before renovation. There was a door. Not a panel, not a hidden compartment. An actual door, built directly into the closet wall. I stared at the image, confused, because that door no longer existed. Someone had sealed it, covered it, erased it. The question hit me immediately. Where did it lead? The answer wasn't included. None of the reports explained it. Several pages appeared to be missing, torn out, removed, deliberately. The more I searched, the clearer it became. Someone had edited history. Someone had carefully removed specific information. Just enough to hide the truth, not enough to erase it completely. A cold draft passed through the room. I looked up. The archive door stood slightly open. I was certain I had closed it. For several seconds, I simply stared, listening. Nothing, only silence. The hotel remained still, yet unease lingered. I crossed the room and shut the door again, then returned to the desk. The feeling didn't leave. It grew stronger, as if the building itself disliked what I was finding. Hours passed. The deeper I dug, the more disturbing the picture became. Missing travelers, altered records, hidden photographs, sealed passageways. Every discovery pointed toward something carefully concealed. Then I found the oldest case, a newspaper dated 56 years earlier. The article occupied only a small corner, easy to overlook. A brief report about a woman named Clara Hayes, travel writer, age 28, last seen entering the Grand Bell Hotel, never seen again. Ordinarily, the article would have blended into the others, except for one detail. Someone had circled a sentence in red ink. The mark looked recent, not decades old. Recent. I leaned closer. The circled sentence read, "Hotel staff reported hearing a second voice inside Miss Hayes' room despite witnesses, confirming she arrived alone." A chill spread through my chest. A second voice. The phrase echoed inside my mind, because suddenly I remembered something. A detail buried inside another report. A businessman vanished after neighbors reported hearing him arguing with someone. Someone who supposedly wasn't there. Another guest reported conversations coming from an empty room. Another witness described hearing footsteps belonging to two people instead of one. My hands slowly tightened around the paper. The pattern wasn't limited to disappearances. There were reports of someone else, someone unseen, someone present before each case. The realization changed everything. Maybe the missing travelers weren't alone after all. Maybe they never had been. I looked toward the dark windows. Night had fully settled outside. The hotel felt larger now, older, more secretive, like a living thing keeping its own memories. Then another thought struck me. The luggage room, the hidden records, the sealed door. They all suggested one thing. Someone inside the hotel knew exactly what happened. Maybe not today. Maybe not anymore. But at some point, somebody knew. And they worked very hard to hide it. The discovery should have felt like progress. Instead, it filled me with dread. Because the mystery was no longer abstract. It was personal, deliberate, human, or at least it had started that way. A sudden sound interrupted my thoughts. Soft, distant, coming from somewhere above. I froze. The noise came again. A door closing. Slowly, carefully, not slamming, not accidental, deliberate. My pulse accelerated. Nobody else should have been inside the hotel. The preservation team was gone. The building was locked. Yet someone had just closed a door. I grabbed my flashlight. The archive suddenly felt too small, too isolated. I stepped into the hallway. Darkness stretched in both directions. Dust floated through the beam of light. The corridor appeared empty, silent. Then I noticed something on the floor. A sheet of paper. It hadn't been there earlier. I was certain of that. Slowly I approached. The paper looked old, yellowed, folded once. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it. It was a guest registration card. Room 214. No surprise there, but the name written across the card made my stomach drop. Because the guest wasn't somebody from 40 years ago, or 20 years ago, or even 8 years ago. The card carried today's date, and under guest name, someone had written my name in fresh black ink. My name should not have been on that card. I stared at it under the beam of my flashlight, convinced I was missing something. Maybe it was a joke. Maybe somebody from the preservation team was trying to scare me. Maybe there was a simple explanation. But the longer I looked, the less believable those explanations became. The registration card looked old, not freshly printed, not recently created. The paper itself appeared yellowed, aged, yet my name had been written in dark black ink that looked almost new, as if someone had waited years to fill it in. A cold sensation settled deep inside my chest. The hallway suddenly felt much longer than before, much quieter. I folded the card and slipped it into my pocket. Then I headed for the front entrance. For the first time since arriving at the Grand Bell Hotel, I wanted to leave. Not forever, just long enough to clear my head, to think, to breathe somewhere that didn't smell like dust and old secrets. But when I reached the lobby, I stopped. The front doors stood exactly where they always had. Tall, glass, locked, nothing unusual. Yet my eyes drifted toward the guest register sitting on the reception counter. Something about it bothered me. I couldn't explain why. Finally, I walked over, opened the book, and immediately felt my pulse quicken. The final entry on the last page had been written that day. My day, my arrival, my signature, room 214. I stared at the page. I had never signed this book. Nobody had asked me to. The preservation team used digital paperwork. There was no reason for my name to appear there. Yet there it was, written in handwriting that looked disturbingly similar to my own. I closed the book immediately. The lobby suddenly felt smaller, as though the hotel itself had quietly shifted around me. For several moments, I simply stood there, thinking, trying to stay rational. Somebody was doing this. A real person. Not ghosts. Not curses. A person. Someone inside the hotel. Someone who knew I was investigating. The realization gave me a strange sense of relief. Fear became easier when it had a human face. At least that's what I told myself. Then I remembered the hidden door, inside room 214. The missing reports, the secret compartment, the decades of disappearances, and the relief quickly faded. The next morning I returned with a new goal. Find the basement archive, not the luggage room. Something deeper, something hidden. The missing records suggested more existed beneath the hotel. Too many documents had vanished. Too many pages had been removed. If answers existed anywhere, they would be underground. The search took most of the morning. Old maintenance maps proved frustrating. Sections had been crossed out. Entire corridors no longer appeared. Several rooms existed physically, but not on paper. It felt less like studying blueprints, and more like solving a puzzle somebody had intentionally broken. Around noon, I finally found a clue. Behind the boiler room, a rusted steel door, half concealed by shelving. No labels, no markings, no record of it anywhere. Dust covered the handle. Yet strangely, the dust around the lock appeared disturbed. Someone had used it recently. That realization made me hesitate. Then curiosity pushed me forward. The key ring from management contained dozens of keys. The seventh one worked. The lock clicked softly. The door opened inward. Cold air drifted out. A smell followed. Paper, mold, the scent of forgotten things. My flashlight revealed a narrow staircase descending into darkness. I stood at the top for several seconds, listening. Nothing. No sounds. No movement. Only silence. Then I started downward. The stair seemed endless. Concrete walls surrounded me. Each step echoed softly. The hotel above gradually disappeared. By the time I reached the bottom, it felt as though I had entered a completely different building. A hidden version of the Grand Bell. One buried beneath the visible one. The staircase opened into a large underground corridor. Rows of storage rooms stretched into darkness. Most doors stood open. Many sat empty. Others contained old furniture, broken equipment, stacks of supplies. Then I found the archive. The room wasn't marked, but I knew immediately. Shelves covered every wall. Thousands of files. Thousands. My flashlight moved across endless rows of boxes. The sheer size of the collection stunned me. The hotel had hidden decades of records underground. Records nobody seemed meant to find. My excitement briefly outweighed my fear. This was what I needed. Evidence, answers, proof. I selected a box at random, opened it, and immediately understood why it had been hidden. Inside sat police reports. Original reports. Not copies, not public versions. The real documents. Many contained handwritten notes, never included in official records. Witness interviews, photographs, investigator observations, information removed from public files. My pulse quickened. Someone had been collecting everything, not just hotel records. Police evidence too. I opened another box, then another. The pattern became clear. Every disappearance, every investigation, every missing traveler, all preserved here, carefully organized, as if somebody wanted a complete history, or a complete trophy collection. The thought disturbed me deeply. Hours passed. The deeper I searched, the stranger the evidence became. Several reports mentioned unusual guest selections. Victims often shared similarities. Same age range, same travel habits, same arrival patterns. Many were alone. Most stayed only briefly. Almost all lacked local family. The disappearances were not random, not even close. Someone had chosen them. The realization felt horrifying, because random tragedy is one thing. Selection is another. Selection means intent, planning, purpose. I continued digging. Eventually, I found a collection of photographs, unlike anything else in the archive. The images weren't police evidence. They appeared personal, secret, taken without permission. Travelers checking in, travelers entering elevators, travelers walking hallways. Hundreds of them. Each photograph labeled with dates and room numbers. Some victims appeared multiple times, observed for days before vanishing, watched, studied, evaluated. I swallowed hard. Whoever assembled this archive hadn't merely documented events. They had participated. The evidence felt undeniable. Then I noticed a symbol, a small circle drawn in red ink. Several photographs carried it. Not all, only certain ones. I searched further. The same symbol appeared inside reports, inside guest records, inside maintenance files, always beside specific names, specific rooms, specific dates. I copied everything into my notebook. The symbol clearly mattered. I just didn't know why. Yet, hours later, I finally discovered the answer. Hidden inside a maintenance ledger. The symbol identified targeted guests. Not ordinary guests. Targets. The word appeared directly beside the symbol. My hands froze. Targets. The meaning struck immediately. Somebody inside the hotel had selected victims before they disappeared. Not randomly. Systematically. Carefully. The missing travelers had never been accidents. They had been chosen. A deep sense of dread settled over me. Because the archive wasn't documenting mysteries. It was documenting a process. One repeated over decades. One organized enough to survive generations. Then another realization hit me. The symbol beside my registration card. The card upstairs. The one carrying my name. I had seen it. The same red circle. My stomach tightened instantly. I pulled the card from my pocket. Examined it again. There it was. Small. Subtle. Easy to miss. The symbol. The exact same symbol. For several seconds, I couldn't breathe properly. The archive suddenly felt much darker. Much deeper. I was no longer researching victims. According to the records, I had become one. A soft noise echoed somewhere beyond the archive shelves. I froze. The sound came again. A distant metallic scrape. Very faint. Very slow. Someone moving. Not above. Not in the hotel. Down here. In the underground levels. I switched off my flashlight. Darkness swallowed everything instantly. My heartbeat thundered inside my ears. The scrape came again. Closer this time. Followed by footsteps. Slow. Measured. Patient. Whoever it was knew exactly where they were going. And for the first time since arriving at the Grand Bell Hotel, I realized a terrifying possibility. The archive wasn't abandoned. Someone was still maintaining it. Someone was still adding names. And judging by the card in my pocket, someone had already decided where my file belonged. I shouldn't start with silence, but the floor above me is already making noise, even though every official record says it doesn't exist anymore. I'm standing in the lobby of the Grand Marrow Hotel, and the receptionist just told me something I can't shake. There is no floor above the fourth, she said. But I can hear footsteps right now. Slow, careful, like someone is walking just above my head, testing each step like they're afraid the building might answer back. I look up at the ceiling without meaning to. The paint is old, cracked in thin lines like dry skin. A ceiling fan turns slowly, even though no air is moving. The sound above it keeps going. Footstep, pause, footstep. My name is Rayan Malik, and I came here to film a documentary about abandoned places that were never officially abandoned. At least, that's what I told my crew. But the truth is simpler. I saw a single line in an old newspaper article. Entire upper floor sealed after incident. No access permitted under any condition. No details, no names, no explanation. Just a building that decided to forget a part of itself. And now I'm standing inside it. The receptionist watches me too closely as I sign the guest register. Her pen scratches too hard on the paper, like she's trying to carve my name instead of write it. "You're staying in room 412, she says without looking up. "That's the top floor," I ask. Her hand stops. For half a second, she doesn't move at all. Then she continues writing like nothing happened. "Yes," she says. But I already counted the floors from outside. There are only 4 visible levels. No fifth. No hidden extension. No structure that should allow anything above it. So what is above me right now? The elevator doors open with a tired sigh. Inside smells like metal that's been breathing too long without cleaning. I step in and press 4. The doors close slowly. And that's when I hear it clearly. Not above anymore. Directly overhead. Walking again. I look up at the ceiling panel inside the elevator. It's slightly loose, just enough to show a thin, dark gap around the edges. Something about it feels wrong. Not broken, not old. Hidden. The elevator starts moving. But I don't feel the usual drop in my stomach. Instead, I feel something like resistance, like the building is deciding whether to allow the movement or not. Floor 1 passes. Floor 2. Floor 3. Each level feels slower than it should, like time is stretching just to make me notice. Then the elevator slows near floor 4 and stops. The doors do not open. I press the button again. Nothing happens. The footsteps above me stop too. Complete silence now. That's worse, because silence in a building like this doesn't feel empty. It feels attentive. A soft click comes from the elevator speaker. No announcement, just a sound, like someone tapping a microphone on the other side of a wall. Then a voice comes through. Low, faint, almost polite. "Wrong floor." My hand freezes midair. I didn't press anything. The elevator jolts slightly and starts moving again, but not upward or downward in a way that makes sense. It feels sideways, like it's no longer following the building's structure. The digital floor indicator flickers. 4, then 4 again, then 3, then something blank. Then it shows. Just a dash. I step back without thinking. The elevator doors open. But what I see is not floor 4. It's a hallway. Long, narrow, lit by weak yellow bulbs that buzz like tired insects. The carpet is dark red, but uneven, like it has been walked on too many times in the same patterns. And something about it makes my stomach tighten instantly. It looks like the hotel, but older, worn down in a way that doesn't match time, as if it's been left alone but still used. The elevator behind me closes. I don't remember pressing anything. Now I'm standing in the hallway that should not exist, and I hear footsteps again. Behind me, closer this time. I turn fast. Nothing. Just the elevator door sealed shut, like it never opened. But the hallway in front of me stretches farther than it should. I walk slowly, each step quiet, careful not to make the same sound I heard earlier. The carpet feels slightly damp under my shoes. Halfway down the hall, I see doors. Room numbers. But they don't follow logic. 401, 402, 403, then 409, then 406. Numbers out of order. like someone rearranged memory instead of rooms. I stop at room 412, my assigned room. The door is already slightly open. That's the first real fear I feel, because I didn't open it, and I know no one else should have keys to this place. I push the door slowly. It creaks like it's surprised I'm here. Inside, the room is normal at first glance. Bed, table, curtain, a small lamp glowing weakly. But then I notice something that breaks that illusion immediately. There are footprints on the carpet. Fresh, still dark, leading from the window to the bathroom and back again. Like someone is packing, waiting. I step inside slowly, listening for any sound. The air feels warmer than the hallway, too warm, like the room has been occupied recently. I move toward the bathroom door. It's slightly open. Inside, the mirror is fogged. Not from steam, from breath, and written on it in finger strokes is a single line. Don't geo above. My throat tightens, because I didn't tell anyone I was planning to go anywhere above. And I still haven't even seen a staircase. I turn sharply toward the room door. It is now closed. I didn't hear it close. My hand reaches for the handle, but before I touch it, a soft knock comes from inside the walls. 3 taps. Slow, like someone is answering back. I step away instinctively. The lamp flickers. Once, twice, then steadies. And for a second, I see it clearly in the reflection of the mirror behind me. A shape standing just outside the bathroom door. Not fully formed, not fully visible, but waiting. I spin around instantly. Nothing there. Of course, nothing there. But now the room feels smaller, like it has shifted around me, like the walls are listening. And then the footsteps start again. Not outside, not above, inside the room, circling me. Slow, measured, patient. I back away toward the bathroom, my breathing getting heavier. The mirror fog begins to clear on its own, and new words appear, written from the inside, as if someone is standing behind the glass. They form slowly, one letter at a time. You're on the wrong floor now. The lamp goes out. Complete darkness. And in that darkness, I hear something right next to my ear. Not a voice, a breath, and then a whisper that doesn't belong to any direction in the room. The floor above is not empty. The last thing I notice before everything goes silent again is this. The room number on the door has changed. It no longer says 412. It now reads, "The wallpaper is not supposed to move." That's the first thought that hits me when I press my hand against the hallway wall and feel it. Breathe back. Not a vibration, not old building settling. A slow, soft push, like something on the other side noticed me first. I freeze. My fingers are still touching the wall. The surface is warm. Too warm for a sealed corridor. I pull my hand back slowly, and for a second I swear I see a faint outline under the wallpaper. Not a shape exactly, more like pressure, like someone standing just inches away, waiting for me to blink first. I shouldn't be here, but I am. And I still don't know how I ended up on a floor that officially does not exist. My name is Rayan Malik, and I came to document a hotel that only has 4 floors. But I am standing in a hallway that has at least 7 doors stretching deeper than the building should allow. Room 413 is behind me now. The number keeps flickering like it can't decide what it wants to be. 413, 412, 413 again. Like the building is confused about what reality I'm allowed to stay in. I walk forward, slow, careful, Each step makes the carpet sink a little too deeply, like it remembers footsteps better than I do. The wallpaper pattern is floral, faded yellow and brown, but the longer I look at it, the more it feels wrong. The flowers are not repeating correctly. They are slightly different each time, like they were printed one by one instead of mass-produced. Halfway down the hall, I notice something new. A seam, a vertical line in the wallpaper that shouldn't be there. I lean closer. It's not just a seam. It's a door outline, painted over, hidden, but not well enough. My breath slows without permission. I press my fingers along it, and the wall gives a soft, hollow sound, like wood under thin disguise. There is a room here, a real room, sealed. I step back and look around the hallway. No cameras, no staff, no sound except the faint buzzing of the lights above me. Then I notice something else. Every few meters, there is another outline under the wallpaper. Not one, not two, at least 6. Hidden doors all along the corridor. Like the hallway was redesigned to forget itself. I swallow hard, because this is not normal renovation. This is concealment. Intentional. I pull out my phone and switch on the camera. The screen flickers immediately. Signal bars drop to 0. The battery icon dips from 67% to 54% in less than a second. That shouldn't be possible. Not unless something is draining it or interfering. I try recording anyway. The camera opens, then freezes. The image on the screen shows the hallway. But behind me, not in front. I turn slowly. Nothing, but the camera still shows movement. A shape walking behind me in the recording. Slow, close. I shut the phone off immediately. My hand is shaking now, and the hallway feels longer than before. That's when I hear it. A faint scratching sound from the wall next to me. Not loud, not aggressive, patient, like fingernails testing wood from inside. I step closer to one of the hidden door outlines. The scratching stops. Silence returns instantly. Too instantly. I lean in anyway, and whisper without meaning to. Is someone in there? A pause. Then, a single knock from inside the wall. I step back so fast I almost fall. The wallpaper trembles. Not all at once. Just the section I touched. Like it reacted. Like it recognized me. And then a voice comes through. Soft. Muffled. Barely audible. Don't open it. My throat tightens. It is not warning me. It sounds like it is remembering being trapped. I stand there, unable to move, while the wall settles again into stillness. But now I know something worse. They are not empty rooms. They are occupied, just not in a way that makes sense. I continue walking, because stopping feels worse. The hallway turns slightly left without a visible corner. That alone makes my stomach drop. The geometry of the place is bending in ways that should not be possible. And then I see it. A door that is not hidden. Room 417. It is slightly open. A thin strip of darkness inside. I approach slowly. Every instinct tells me not to. But something about it feels familiar. Like I've seen it before. Or dreamed it. I push it open. The room inside is not like room 413. This one looks lived in. But wrong. The bed is made perfectly. Too perfectly. No wrinkles, no folds, like it was arranged by someone who doesn't understand sleep. On the desk there are objects. Old ones, A cracked alarm clock frozen at 3:17 a.m. A stack of papers and photographs. I step inside without realizing. The air is colder here. Much colder. I pick up one of the photos. It shows the same hallway I'm standing in. But the wallpaper is different. In the photo, the hidden doors are all open. And inside each one, there are silhouettes. Standing. Watching. My hand trembles. I flip the photo over. Written on the back in faded ink. Rooms do not stay closed forever. My breathing gets shallow. Because the handwriting is recent. Not decades old. Not even years. Recent enough that it could have been written today. I look around the room again and notice something I missed before. The closet door is slightly ajar. I didn't open it. I didn't touch it. But it is open. Slowly I move toward it. Each step feels heavier. Like the room is adding weight to my body to slow me down. I reach the closet. And I stop. Because inside there are coats hanging. Fresh coats. Still clean. Still pressed. Still warm looking somehow. As if someone just took them off. I reach out slowly and touch one. It is not fabric cold. It is body warm. I pull my hand back immediately. And that's when the closet light turns on by itself. A soft click, illuminating the inside. But now the coats are gone. And instead, there is a narrow hallway inside the closet. A hallway that should not exist in a hotel room. A hallway made of the same floral wallpaper. My mind refuses to accept it. But my body already reacts. Because I hear footsteps again. Behind me. Inside the room. Not from outside anymore. I turn sharply. Nothing there. But the mirror on the wall has changed. It is no longer reflecting me properly. My reflection is standing too still. Not matching my movement. And behind my reflection, there is someone else. Standing in the hallway I just came from. Slowly stepping closer. I back away toward the closet instinctively. My reflection in the mirror finally moves. But not with me. It turns its head first. Looking at me. Like it is disappointed I noticed. Then it raises a hand. And points behind me. I don't want to turn. But I do. The closet hallway is no longer empty. There is a figure standing there. Not fully visible. Just enough to understand shape. Too tall for the space. Too still for anything human. And it whispers, "You already entered once." My mouth goes dry. Because I realize something I didn't before. Room 417 is not a room. It is a return point. A place where something resets you. I stumble backward, but the room door is gone. There is only wallpaper now. Sealed completely. No exit. Only walls that remember too much. The lights flicker once, then settle. And in that moment of dim glow, I understand the worst part. The hallway outside is no longer the same hallway I entered. It is longer, deeper, and I can hear more doors opening behind the wallpaper. One by one, slowly, like something is waking up inside the building. And I am not sure anymore if I am the one exploring it, or if I am the thing it finally noticed.